morning, everyone. I want to thank you for coming out on this rainy day. So good to see so many faces here on such a rainy day. My name is Sheryl Vogt. I'm Director of Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Special Collections Libraries. The Russell Library, as many of you know, is the home of the Georgia Disability History Archive. This building houses three of University of Georgia special collections. Those are the Harvard Rare Book and Manuscript Library, the Russell Library, and the Walter Brown Media Archive and Peabody Award Collection. How many of you are here for the first time? Wonderful. We're glad to see so many new faces. Often it's difficult to know if we're just attracting the same crowd every time. It's nice to know we're reaching out to new people and new people to become aware of this wonderful program we do. While you're here, I want you to take an opportunity to see the galleries on this floor, and we hope that you will return in the future with your family and friends. This building is really for the people of the state of Georgia and all of its visitors, so we'd like for you to come. Well, let me talk a little bit about housekeeping information. Many of you may have already found the restrooms, but if you go out the door here into the hallway and take a left, it's down on the left past the double doors. There's coffee and tea service and a continental breakfast, and then we'll have breaks, and lunch will also be served in this adjoining room. We have a brief break scheduled.
It looks like another application, just using the mic. Please close it, then try again.
Are we okay? I wanted to say we have a brief break scheduled for around 10:40 to 11 o'clock. So I encourage you to take use of that because they will be picking up the breakfast service around 11. And if you would like to, just quietly get up anytime during the meeting and go help yourself to a restroom break or to more food and coffee. So just feel free to come and go as you please, just be quiet. If you need any assistance, please ask the people at the registration desk. As the holder of the Disability History Archive, I do want to say to you again that we need your help in identifying individuals and organizations within the disability rights community that may have materials for the archive. We encourage you to consider whether you yourself or some friends that you may have have something that they would like to donate to the archive. So if you would try to get in touch with me or Robert Lay, who's over here on this side by the windows, and other members of our staff, we would be glad to talk with you about that and give you our contact information. We appreciate your attendance at the 5th annual Georgia Disability History Symposium, The Power of Presence, From Segregation to Innovation. And I'm happy now to introduce Dr. Zo Stoneman, who many of you know, she is Director of the Institute on Human Development and Disability here at the University of Georgia.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My picture is here to be able to get up to the microphone. I've had the pleasure the last 2 days to be attending the Advocacy conference, which is right down the road from us. And one of the things that really struck me was there was a question posed after the formal presentations to two of the keynote speakers. And the question was, in order to deal with the dismal statistics we have about employment for people with disabilities, if you could change only one thing, and you could make that thing really, really good, but only one thing, what would you do? Did they suggest maybe we needed better transition services for kids leaving high school? Maybe we need to really, really focus on customized employment and get all the providers really, really confident in customized employment. Maybe it was VR, vocational rehabilitation. Maybe we needed to really energize that system. No. All of those things are important, and that's not what they said. Do you know what they said?
No.
From kindergarten through high school, every child with a disability, every child, period, needs to be included in the regular classroom with all other children. Of all things that could make a difference for employment, start at kindergarten, start at pre-K, have the children with everybody else, making all those peer relationships, and that is what these people with employment specialization said would make the biggest difference for employment. That's why we're here today.
Yay!
And I'm delighted to see so many people and a lot of folks who've not been to our previous symposium. Our institute is celebrating its 50th anniversary here on the University of Georgia campus. And part of what I've done the last year is go through a lot of archives and old newsletters and things to really try and put in place a timeline for our institute. And one of the things that really struck me is sometimes I get real pessimistic about change. Like, oh my gosh, it's not happening, this, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing that, it's not happening. But you know, when this institute was founded, it was possible for a school system to say to someone, even with a very mild disability as they appear to kindergarten, I'm sorry, we do not educate children like you here. And parents had absolutely nothing to do other than say, oh, and take their child back home again.
No.
People could creative solutions to that, but that's what was true. There were a whole lot of kids who wound up institutionalized because their parents were told at birth, the best thing for this child is you never form a bond with them. You put that child in an institution.
No.
50 years has made a real difference. We've got a long way to go, but we are making progress, and it was important for me to be able to have that documented for me and to really think about it. One of the strengths we have in Georgia is what we call our DB network. It's all on the same page relating to things like school inclusion. The DB Council, Judy, the Center for Leadership at Georgia State, all of these folks are looking toward the same future. And the number of partners we've had in terms of co-funding this event expands every year. And in addition to the Russell Library and our Institute, I really want to call your attention to the Georgia Advocacy Office. It's done an incredible job in terms of registrations. The Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. The University of Georgia Center for Social Justice, Civil and Human Rights, which is in the School of Social Work. The Center for Leadership and Disability at Georgia State University. Star Choices. The University of Georgia Disability Resource Center Speakers Bureau. AMS Vans Atlanta, which provided free transportation for our keynote speaker. Georgia Microboard Association. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Ann Halterwenger, who is here. Her husband, in her honor, donated a gift to the University of Georgia, and we are using a part of that donation to be able to fund this wonderful event. At this point, I'd like to introduce the person who actually makes all this happen. You know the analogy of the duck that seems to be swimming on top of the water but is frantically doing this underneath? This is Gillian and Grable. For the last 5 years, this individual has made this institute happen. She may not be the keynote speaker, she may not be the person whose name is high on the agenda, but trust me, y'all would not be sitting here, you would not have all this stuff in front of you. We wouldn't have a program if it weren't for this woman. Let me introduce Judy and Grable.
Thank you. Thank you. We're thrilled that you're here and that you chose to spend your day with us, and many of you traveled
quite a ways to get here, so we appreciate your effort. We have folks from Hazelhurst, from Barnesville, Savannah, North Georgia, all over the state of Georgia. And just look around you for a moment. Look at this community, drink it in, and enjoy the pleasure of your conversations today, because you will learn a lot and you will engage. And we just appreciate you being here. This took months and months of planning, as you can imagine, hundreds of invisible acts. And as I name your group, please raise your hand and we'll applause at the end. We had an incredible planning committee. Please raise your hands. We have staff of the library as well as IHDD who made this happen, and Judy's drivers, and you each have a facilitator at your table who will lead your small group. So please give applause to all of you. You also have on your table biographies of your speakers and your facilitators, so in case you want to follow up with anybody, you can get in contact. There's incredible resources in this room, and we want you to be able to connect with those resources.
Yes.
So seated beside me is a young man, Aaron, named Eric Nanduba. And Eric is the youngest person in our room today, in our community. And Eric is from Clarkston, Georgia. He's a new American. He's 14 years old. Not yet. You're 13, almost 14. Okay. And Eric reminds us that youth are now all over the world leading the way we transform, not only taking care of our planet, how we make our schools and communities free of violence, but how we create schools and communities for all of us to make our contribution. And as our friend and colleague Beth Mount, who is here today in the purple jacket, she is from Georgia, she reminds us that we can imagine a world that works for everybody. So thank you, Eric, for being here. Thank you for being part of the youth that are leading us all over the world.
You walk.
Say it again.
You'll always be an advocate.
Yes, Eric is saying he will always be an advocate. Yes, thank you. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Leslie Lipson. And I have had the pleasure of working with Leslie for over 20 years, and her friendship as well. She is a mom, she's a gifted teacher, and she's an attorney and a self-described inclusionista. She's been deeply involved in advocacy for and with people with disabilities for over 20 years, and has her own consulting company now, Lipson Advocacy, Education, Legal, and Strategy Specialist. So feel free to look at her bio and contact her if you need her. She offers solutions using general and special education law for advocacy from a value-based foundation and a mindset of presuming competence. Leslie loves working with advocates, and she is passionate about kids and coaching their families and others. And when I think of Leslie, I think of a quote by Toni Morrison, which is, "Our job as adults is to find the treasure in young people." Wow. And that's what Leslie does. I give you Leslie.
Wow. Thank you, Gillian. And thank y'all for having me today. I'm looking forward to discussing where we come from. We always have the urge to start with where we are now, what the problems are currently, but we really have to look back to see what we've come from, what we've accomplished, what that's meant in the context of our political and our cultural community, and where we're going next. So when thinking about special education, it really has been a search for equity and inclusion and belonging. And you can see that throughout the process of special education, which is sometimes neither special nor education, but we're going for it. When we think about it, let's start over. So I went to Google when I started to really hone in on this topic, and I was mind blown how little I could find actually on the history of special education. Especially I started to drill down into Georgia. And then I found somebody writing about the lack of history of special education. The idea being, as invisible as much of our work is, or the history of people with disabilities, mirrors the same underground notion of what's happened for students with disabilities over time. And then I felt better, that I wasn't missing something major, because there really isn't very much out there. Much of what's theorized to not be out there is because we can get embarrassed about what we did in the past, looking back on it with some sort of chagrin, even though knowing we did the best with the information we had at that time. So we've been erased parts of our history, and very little that's available, and people aren't talking about it, because people are quite frankly embarrassed. But we have to, because history offers us so many lessons. So we're thinking about history. Somebody who I think many of you might have heard, Dan Habib, says this quote: "Disabled people have always been on the wrong side of history. We've been left and forced to die, been vilified by those who think we're manifestations of sin. Our final solution, through seldom acknowledged, came first, and genocide honed its skills in our lives in the basement of institutions. We've been sterilized, brutalized, congregated, segregated, persecuted, and destroyed. History isn't our friend."
No.
And you won't find within the field of education that this is distanced from that. Education has happened in the context of what's occurred for people with disabilities at every single stage. So in that sense, if we had time, you could think about what you know about what was going on in America at any given time, and you could probably guess at that point what was going on within education. Make sense? So, early United States education history. The Supreme Court in Wisconsin said that students with disabilities had a depressing and nauseating effect on students. Only last night we were talking about this, the idea of certain states offered special education services. This is before the federal mandates. And at this point, the most is 16 states affirmatively offering special education before federal rights came in and said states will offer special education services. And so I want to help you with a visual to think about what was going on in America at this time. And so clearly, students with disabilities mostly were experiencing exclusion. And to be clear, this was legal exclusion. People were at home. And when kids with disabilities were at school, it was because of the benevolence of one teacher or one very valued family, or a system that may have small openings for people. Within the context of education, we have to think about our state's dedication to the history and the use of institutionalization. And what a major force in our mindset. If you're naughty or bad, you're going down to Milledgeville, to our economy, how many people worked within these systems, and that a lot of our early educational opportunities came within the form of institutionalization. The schools were located on the campuses of institutions. And actually, this picture is from Central State. That I did find. And obviously, I think many of you probably know, but it cannot be understated, it became one of the largest mental health institutions in the world, and at one point had over 12,000 people, many children. So when we think about civil rights and the context of opening up the schoolhouse gates, the beginning of of our consciousness around segregation occurred within the context of Brown versus Board of Education and the African American Civil Rights Movement that's still going on today, hard fought and a massive struggle. We can't talk about it as something that's in the past, especially in the field of special education. These issues around racism are ever present. This Supreme Court case decided that it was unconstitutional to segregate by race. And this started within families, units that were organizing all over the country. Different groups of families and parents of kids with disabilities started to raise their consciousness and thinking about if segregation causes these impacts for people who are African American, what does that also look like for people with disabilities? So, another law that came in around 1965 is called SIE, well at this point it was ESEA. This is part of Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, and it actually included information around free lunches and supporting people's nutritional needs, and said that with federal money, people with disabilities should have equal opportunity to education. And this has had reiterations in 2015, when you see here the ESSA, this law is the predecessor to ESSA. And as we see this growth, I know this little part's kind of dry, but I want you to see the progression and the movements towards the federalization of the right of kids with disabilities to at least get in the schoolhouse gate, right? I'm not talking about people reading and writing and going to post-secondary education and getting great jobs and having full and inclusive, meaningful lives. We're just talking about getting in the door. And a large part of this history really is about presence. So we have two very foundational, important court cases, usually called shorthand Park and Mills. And these cases created a legal right within the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that kids with disabilities had a right to an education. And these court cases were the foundation of what we know as IDEA. These court cases, much like other types of civil rights movements, started to raise the consciousness of people across America, thinking about what is happening for the people we know and love, and for people with disabilities, what's happening for us across our nation. And as people's consciousness were raised, eventually the government was responding. And so in this particular case, there were large congressional investigations looking at how many kids are being served in schools with this, 18 states that have offered, and how many kids are being totally excluded, right? We're still in the circle where people are totally excluded, many, many folks, right? And we're raising the consciousness and thinking about what does it mean for people to have rights? And what do these rights look like for children? And what's similar then, same now, and I think is a big issue within the field of advocacy and special education, is rights are totally held in the hands of who in special education?
Yeah.
Who? Who holds legal rights in special education? You know this. The system in part, but parents. Parents. When you look at the field of special education advocacy, you talk about policymakers, you talk about parents. There's not a lot of talk about students. You'd be hard pressed for every table to come up with one name of a student with a disability who's a leader in the field. It's still a very parent-driven field. And there are reasons for that. There are legal reasons, and there are maturity reasons. I have children. There are all sorts of reasons around that. But I would hope in the future, and this wasn't necessarily what I was tasked with, but I would hope in the future we'd be talking about what students are experiencing and their input and information as we're moving forward with this. It's a big gaping hole in the field of advocacy. After that, 1973, we have the Rehabilitation Act of, what does that say? I can't even see. We have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the big fight for the regulations to be created to enact it. Our keynote speaker was the architect of a major sit-in to have those regulations enforced. It's interesting to be narrating this history when you have people who are so deeply involved in it. And this required accommodations to students with disabilities in schools. And this started the kind of avalanche of federal regulation that was coming our way. 1975, the predecessor to IDEA, we'll call Public Law 94 or 142, was enacted. This is where you start the things you've heard a lot about. So IEPs. Yes. Yes. At least, I'm glad somebody's excited about it. Least restrictive environment, parental safeguards, due process hearings, these big pillars of what we consider to be civil rights for kids with disabilities were enacted at this point in time. And in 1990, they changed the title to IDEA. Next, you're very familiar with this, I'm going to guess, but the passage of the signing of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And when you combine, and I know that you're looking at my slides and you're like, oh, I wish I had these in paper. But if you go to, I'll have my Facebook page on the last slide, and these are on my Facebook page. You can just link and download them immediately, my business Facebook page. Because I know it's hard to try to take any notes. So we have the ADA, and when you look at what the ADA in Section 504 offers kids with disabilities in schools, it offers them way more than just getting through the schoolhouse gates. Part of what's really important in school is not just your goals and objectives and your behavior plans and all of these things that really may allow access and individualization. What's also really important for us is the experience of being in school and the things that we gain from those relationships and that experience, and recess and friends and teachers and lunch. And for many kids that I've represented over my legal career, and for many, just got a call this morning from a family, these are things people are still having great difficulty getting access to. So when we talk about inclusion over time, thinking about it legally and societally, culturally, inclusion is not a strategy to help people fit into systems and structures. It's not the plan that should allow you to be included. It's about transforming systems and structures to make it better for everybody. So when you think about IDEA and the idea of the least restrictive environment, the least restrictive environment blesses the idea of exclusion. It clearly states that there's a continuum. Y'all probably have heard this language. There's a continuum. And some kids will be here, and some kids will be here, and some kids will be in the middle. And when we talk about that, we're talking about gradients of exclusion. How excluded are you going to be? So one of the major issues we have as advocates is how are we going to flip it? How are we going to change the paradigm? How do we work with a law that for 40 years blesses, incentivizes, and funds segregation? It keeps lawyers busy, but it turns out to not be really great work. One thing I want to really highlight, that the field of special education, when we talk about innovation, that's the title of our day today, we're talking about innovation. What the field of special education has offered to education everywhere. And so these are terms that educators should be familiar with within the general education and the special education world, and all other types, made its way even into all other settings, and have really strengthened what we think of as our educational model. So universal design for learning, the massive, prolific use of assistive technology. God bless assistive technology. Positive behavior supports, differentiated instruction, the idea that different kids be working on different things in your class. These are innovations that came out of the field of special education and have been, luckily, co-opted, blessed, and embraced by the general education world. Research-based reading intervention, response to intervention, and not only have these things been embraced, they've been codified. They exist within the law, and they are funded and supported. And one thing I've seen in my career, and I hope to continue to see, is the meshing, adoption, and weaving of these things to break out of the special education world and to go into and become part and parcel every single day in every single classroom to make it possible, welcoming for people with disabilities students with disabilities to be in school. So this is really about collaboration. Collaboration among special education, general education teachers and administrators and policyholders, Department of Education, the advocacy community. Another day we could tell stories about how advocates and the Department of Education have worked together in Georgia on really significant issues and moving this forward. And we need everybody in the room. And I think one of the best, when I was thinking about this presentation, I was looking for like outcome and data for y'all. And I have to tell you, the data is a little depressing. I didn't pull it for you. You don't really want to look at that data. I thought this was the most impressive data. The idea of the educational innovations. Those are some of our best outcomes. So one thing I want to honor in this talk is thinking about the role of parents in every single court case and federal statute and state court case. Parents, oftentimes mothers, have really pushed forward this entire ideal. And one thing I've been working on in my career with many, many people in this room is bringing more people to that important issue. There are so many people, there's a big conversation in our world today about equity in education. So not special things for special people in special places, but what we're going to offer to many people who experience devaluation. And I think the more we can be all come involved in that conversation and bring people into that conversation, we have a much brighter future. So let our classroom reflect our vision of equity and justice for all. Every issue I've worked on behalf of an adult with a disability came because of things that started when people were young. And so we have the opportunity, when we're thinking about education in our past history, to examine what we've done in the past and think about what's coming in our future, and to really be grateful to the pioneers, the people that have helped us along, and have a lot of hope for our future. Okay, thank you.
You're right.
Come on up now.
Okay.
Good morning. Y'all can do better than that. Good morning. Much better. I had a vision of that cheese Danish all morning long as I picked up Kate about 7:17 this morning in Atlanta and drove up here. So I just want to thank the library for providing those Danishes and my motivation. I want to also just thank the organizers, presenters, sponsors, and in particular I want to thank you. We know this isn't the most convenient location for the universe of Georgia, but I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, because I know personally what it takes, and I just want to appreciate you being here. Also want to just I don't think I've wished Zo and her staff a 50th. I know they've been celebrating all year long, but happy 50th IHMB. I also want to know that earlier on, and I know Parker wouldn't let me get away with this, but I'm really happy some people are holding up their phones. And I'm glad they're taking pictures, and I'm glad they're tagging, and I'm glad they're posting, I'm glad they're sharing, and I want you to do more of that. I mean, some of you might not know, but Georgia has the Georgia Disability History Alliance Facebook page. And so take time to like it, take time to share on it, post on it, whatever you can. And I know there's somebody here that had a hashtag. Where is she? Zo is one of your staff. What hashtag are we using? Our Twitter stuff? we'll get that for you, okay? But I want you to, this is funny hearing it from a 68-year-old guy who has like 20 followers on his Twitter account. But whatever, it's just important, I think, that we're here, but there's a universe out there, and they need to know we're here, and we're having a discussion about what it was, what it is, and what it's going to be, and it's important for us to push that out. Julian's already looking at me because we're on Southern time here, by the way, meaning we're already behind, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that we are indeed behind, and that we'll be behind all day long, okay? And just know that's the reality of the situation. So I want you to enjoy being here and going, now we're about 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we'll get it done. We do every year. Julian always tries to cram a day-and-a-half conference in 6 hours. Okay? We call it, it's very Julian-esque. Okay, very Julian-esque. I don't have to introduce Kate Gaynor. How many of you here know Kate? Her video is going to introduce her, but I think probably one of the best things I can say about Kate is she's my friend. I respect her, I trust her, and I can talk to her. And that's all you need to know about Kate. It's somebody you can respect, it's somebody you can trust, and it's somebody you can talk to. And so, in addition to, call her my friend, she is a colleague in justice. And so let's start the video, is that right?
Yes.
And there'll be a little Q&A after the video with Kate. Okay, so first of all, Leslie, I want to thank you for cramming hundreds of years of history in a short period of time. But I also want you to just step back for a second and think about this. Kate's experience was before there was an IHDD. Kate's experience was before there was an IDAA, before there was a 504 Rehab Act, before there was an ADA. And so, but I think there are themes there that we keep trying to struggle with. Her peers learning about her rights and things like that. So we're going to take a couple questions. So if anybody has one, Kate's willing to answer a question.
Mark.
Oh, hold on. You want?
Mark, get home. Oh. Are there any questions? Yes.
What are you there for? What you you now we're gonna what you said get that no I'll put my I'll put my ego I'll go everything. I'll be working my sister and good animal and down many people, not the other stupid things. What you do, you be wake up, you be at wake up, and wake up. I'll go off. That you. Right here. I'm not going on. I got nobody work with me. How you do I'm going to my doctor and on people I got to do everything. It's everything wasn't when I get a little I'll be I don't know that way I said I know more I need to be wake up I need to be need I don't know the people I'm not all that. Right? I used to I used to write what you go to.
Hey, Eric, can I help?
Yeah.
Okay. Eric.
My friend Eric is really good at making his voice heard, and what he was just communicating was about some of his experiences in school. Eric asked, I think this is what I heard, what do you do about, and his words were, when they say you're stupid? Yeah, okay. What do you do when there's nobody in the classroom to help? And I think I heard you say, I have a very good advocate. She's not in school with me every day. So what do we do about that? Was that correct, Eric?
Yeah.
Tough question.
That's a conference.
I'll give you one experience I had. No one ever called me stupid. Oh, they knew better. But there was this one girl in my algebra class that always won. She wouldn't say anything to me. She would just make gestures. Ignorant gestures. I put up with it, put up with it. Silent. I got tired. So in full class one day, I went over to her and I said, excuse me, if you don't leave me alone, I'm gonna beat your ass.
So Eric, I hope that answers your question. And we'll all attend your IEP meeting. Okay? I know we're already way behind, but it's okay. And I think, I know Kate's going to be available all day long. And so I hope you'll enjoy her presence, but I hope you realize what just happened. The youngest person at the symposium just connected with almost the oldest. So thanks a lot, Kate. And I guess we'll hand it over to the next folks.
the teacher who thought that Kate was going to be a troublemaker in school. Let me say that was a very, very wise teacher. Kate has spent her life being a troublemaker. She's a wonderful troublemaker that makes social change and makes good things happen. But this is a troublemaker.
Yeah.
I want to introduce a member of our faculty, Tracy Rackensperger. Tracy, my mic is not on. Tracy came to us from Florida, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees. She earned her doctorate here at the University of Georgia. She's been on the faculty of the University of Georgia now for over a decade. She teaches in our Disability Studies program. She teaches university students and gets some of the highest course evaluations of any of our faculty. She is a person who does a lot of outreach training around the state, and she is a daredevil. There is no sport, there is no high-risk, fun thing that Tracy will not do. So I turn this over to Tracy Rackensperger.
The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was enacted in 1975 as the second major piece of national legislation to protect the civil rights of individuals in the United States who experience disabilities. I was the age of 2 then. This was part of the earliest efforts to safeguard individuals' civil liberties were made with regard to programs and services where federal funds were allotted. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 made illegal inequity, unfairness, and discrimination on the foundation individuals had disabilities in federal processes.
In the front. Is that great?
It's a big gray circle.
That's
Someone with no technical expertise.
High school was just the best. In school, I was always involved in everything, sports, school plays, scouts, etc. I always was included in after-school activities. Before telling you about being included in a neighborhood school though, let me give you some of my schooling background. Up until high school, I was bused to a different school than all the rest of the neighborhood kids. I lived in Seminole County, Florida. In the beginning, Seminole County had no interest in serving kids with certain kinds of disabilities. So they actually paid the neighboring county, Orange County, to take us. Forest Park Elementary was the first school I attended. Forest Park was a segregated school just for people with disabilities. A few years later, Forest Park closed and I went to Lake Silver Elementary. Lake Silver Elementary was a typical school, but they had built almost like a segregated school onto the typical school campus. However, they had transitioned me over to the typical campus pretty much by 5th grade. Remember Seminole County having no interest in serving kids with certain kinds of disabilities? Well, something happened before I reached 7th grade. They got interested in serving kids with certain kinds of disabilities. So all of us got bused to one middle school in the county, Lakeview Middle. Now, I wish I could say the county quit busing kids with certain kinds of disabilities to one particular school for high school. They didn't. I just totally lucked out. The high school they picked was my neighborhood high school. I have such fond memories of high school. Not to say my other experiences were bad. They weren't, though. Being on a hot school bus for an hour or more wasn't the greatest thing ever. The defining inclusive experience I had in high school was being in the television production program. My high school was Lyman High School, the Greyhounds. Apparently I like schools with dog mascots. It had several vocational education programs, like building trades, health occupations, automotive technology, the electrical electronics industry, and personal services. Lyman had a television production program. At that time, the television production program at Lyman was 4 years. We studied the use of lights, lighting, cameras, microphones, camera mounts, and editing. We had basically the same students every year. Gail Goodrich was our teacher. I still keep up with her on Facebook. She still teaches TV at Lyman. Being with the same kids year after year was awesome. I had this happen when I took journalism for a couple years too. Inclusion is much more than being in a classroom with peers without disabilities. It's about being in a classroom with peers without disabilities who care about the person with the disability. I was a part of this club called Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. Vocational Industrial Clubs of America, now called Skills USA, serves students enrolled in technical, trade, industrial, and health programs in high schools, vocational technical schools, and junior and community colleges throughout the country. We were at a state competition. Gail Goodrich had talked with the officials about accommodations I needed at the competition. I don't know what happened, but there were no accommodations I needed at the competition. Of course, Gail Goodrich was mad and fixed it. But you know who else was mad? My fellow peers. They were livid. By the way, my partner and I won that state competition that year. In order for me to fully participate in my television production classes, I needed a holder for my video camera. I needed to be able to connect the camera to my wheelchair. We got the students in the carpentry program to build a mount for me. They did it for class credit. It wasn't like, let's help the poor student in the wheelchair. It was, this student needs a camera mount to fully participate in our classes, so let's build a mount. Let's talk more about inclusion being much more than being in a classroom with peers without disabilities, and about being in a classroom with peers without disabilities who care about the person with the disability. Senior year, we had one day a month where we could go off campus for lunch. It would have been so helpful for the school to provide accessible transportation. However, my friends would use my fold-up wheelchair to put me in their cars to take me off campus. A caring community goes a long way in making schools inclusive. Yes, I had very active parents who made sure I had accommodations and supports, but it was the support of teachers and students that made high school fantastic. That's another thing that made high school great was awesome general education teachers. They made a huge difference. And sometimes we didn't know who the awesome ones were. In my case, the ones who were totally scared of me at first turned out to be best teachers. Also, I had a physical education teacher who would include me in everything, despite what the adaptive physical education teacher kept telling her. When she would come, the adaptive physical education teacher would keep telling the general physical education teacher I needed to do special things. When the adaptive physical education teacher would leave, the general physical education teacher would be like, "Come play softball with us." I believe the adaptive physical education teacher caught me playing inclusively once and just gave up. To change practice, one must understand the policies and traditional understandings regarding people with disabilities, recognize the flaws in these policies and traditional understandings, and be in a position of power to change these policies and traditional understandings. If teachers are unwilling to make appropriate modifications and accommodations for individuals in school, they are contributing to poor post-school outcomes. We must change the way we define success for those with disabilities. For those who have disabilities, success is often defined as the utilization of services and supports to obtain minuscule employment and/or post-secondary education. Services and supports for those who have disabilities have a long history of using deficit-based approaches rather than strengths-based approaches. We must change our expectations of students. We also need to create caring cultures. Lastly, we need to make sure support is made available for activities.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. So we were just back there redesigning the break a little bit because we're running behind. And in order to accommodate our speakers and lunch, we are going to invite you just to take a break when you need to in the next little while before 12 o'clock. Get up, go into the room, use the restroom, whatever you need, okay, so that we can manage everything we're planning to do before lunch. Thank you, Tracy, very much. That was lovely, just lovely. Yeah. I have the pleasure of introducing to you a very short video, excuse me, about a young girl named Thasya. It's by an award-winning director. You may have heard of Dan Habib. His film Intelligent Lives just screened on television, I believe, last week. And many of Dan's films are on YouTube, so you can look them up. Thasya was 8 years old in this film, and what we'd love you to do is notice the imagination and innovation of her teachers and administrators. She's not just included, but in her eyes and the eyes of her classmates, the eyes of her school, and frankly the eyes of her community, she's changing the culture around her through meaningful inclusion because her roles express her passions and her talents. And just watch for what more is possible. I give you this film. Thank you.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dana Lloyd. I'm the director of the Developmental Disabilities Program for the Georgia Advocacy Office. And I'm here to introduce our next part of the day. So we're really glad that you all are here. Rachel Watson is a Northeast Georgia native and an artist working in media of alternative photography, sculpture, installation, printmaking, and metalsmithing. She's currently in the last year of a Master of Fine Art here at the University of Georgia. Rachel's work is an exploration of Central State Hospital and the individual patients that were admitted there. This is Rachel's second year exhibiting here at the Symposium. We're really glad to have her. The first piece was titled 888, and it was an installation of wooden blocks arranged to symbolize the first 888 patients that were admitted to Central State Hospital from 1842 to 1861. This year, Rachel uses metal to represent all the patients that died at Central State. And it honors each individual and is titled for them. It's installed up here at the front of the room in the right-hand corner. We encourage you to visit throughout the day on your breaks and at lunch. But now we'd like to welcome Rachel Watson to share a little bit more with you about her work.
December 1842. Tillman Barnett arrived by carriage with his wife to Georgia State Lunatic, Idiot, and Epileptic Asylum. He was the first patient admitted into what would become the largest mental institution in the world. He was classified as a lunatic. His cause and duration of insanity was unknown. He was 30 years old. He died of manic exhaustion on June 18, 1843, 6 months after his arrival at this facility. People were categorized as a lunatic for reasons such as religious excitement, inclination to study, jealousy, disappointed affection, intemperance, and epilepsy. Out of the first 888 patients, 409 died, 43 of them being under the age of 18. Tillman Barnett may have been the first person that died at what is now called Central State Hospital, but he was not the last. There are believed to be 30,000 unmarked graves on the 2,000 acres at Central State. Since the hospital closed in 2010, the Central State Hospital Local Redevelopment Authority has been trying to sell off the land bit by bit to whoever will buy it. The question I keep asking is, what is going to happen to these people's remains, to the forgotten? My current installation, titled For Them, is centered on this place and these people. Graves at Central State were originally marked with iron grave markers with a number instead of a name. During the 1960s, many of the numbered grave markers were gathered up and discarded in order for prison inmates to clean up the grounds more efficiently. The Georgia Consumer Council responded to this in the 1990s and collected as many iron markers as they could find and assembled them into Cedar Lane Cemetery. These iron markers, which have numbers instead of names, no longer represent an individual. The paperwork was burned or shredded or lost years ago. Instead, these 1,763 markers represent the some 30,000 people that lost their lives on these grounds. My current work involves cutting out copper grave markers by hand, the shape of which is a miniature replica of Cedar Lane Cemetery's iron markers. These miniature markers are then filed, sanded, stamped, and patinaed. My goal is to collect as many names of the deceased as possible and cut out and stamp an individual name onto each marker. For the names I cannot find, I am blind embossing the shape of the marker onto a piece of hand-torn white paper. This is very much a work in progress, as I have only cut out 300 names out of the potential 30,000. While my research started here at Special Collections Library, my current research has sent me to the Georgia Archives, where I scan microfilm of patient registrars from 1862 to 1924. In the installation, I pay special attention to the family members who were admitted together. I feel like that it is important for them to remain side by side. Judah and James Delt were brothers who were admitted on February 3rd, 1846. Judah was 16, James was 7. Both were classified as an idiot, both were deformed, James was blind. James died within 3 months of being a Central State. Judah died just under a year later. So far, I have spent 63 hours and 42 minutes working on this piece. Every hour, every minute, every second is for them. Every person that was mistreated because of an illness or a disability. After this place is torn down, I do not want it to be forgotten. The people who spent time here deserve to be remembered. It makes me wonder if people are just forgetting or are they trying to forget. Thank you.
So as Judy makes her way up, right?
Yes, she's coming right around.
Oh, here she comes, friend.
Yeah.
So are you enjoying the journey? It really is. I know it's kind of ups and downs and past and present with glimpses of the future, and I just appreciate once again all of you being here, because I think there are folks in this room that are going to get us there, right, Beth? I'm not going to do a lot of introduction for a lot of reasons for Judy, because it would take all day. But let's just put it this way. I've known Judy since 1983. Knew of her before then, and actually went out to visit in Berkeley, because I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were starting an independent living center, and everybody said, you need to go to Berkeley to learn how to do this right. And so that's when I first got introduced to the name Judy. But it wasn't until '83 until we met, and I was asked to debate her. I got my ass kicked, excuse me. Well, first of all, they gave me a topic that I really didn't believe in. One of my first job coming out of college was a junior high school counselor, and then I evolved into disability rights. And I was in Colorado, and I was asked at the last moment, hey Mark, you ran a transition program and you ultimately closed it down, but we want you to take the position of how important transition programs are, and we need to have transition programs. And Judy's topic was, we don't need transition programs. People just need to go live in the community, we need to create a support around this, whatever. So needless to say, I lost that debate. But I've known Judy since 1983. Same thing I would say with Kate. I have a lot of respect for her, I trust her, and I can talk to her. She's not only protested, but she has advised 2 presidents. She has traveled around the world, and I was asking her the other day, how many miles does she have? She has over 1 million miles in the air. So I would say she's been around. I was asking Kate on the way up here, describe Judy for me a little bit. She said, Judy's always aware. So I know this little thing we're getting ready to do is going to be, Judy has now become more aware. She was here Monday, she was here yesterday, and she's here today. So who knows where this is going to go. But she's advised leaders around the world. If you haven't had the opportunity to view her TED Talks, over 1 million+ people have viewed her TED Talks. So there is an appetite out there for what folks have been saying today, and there's an appetite for what Judy's life experienced. She's a friend and a colleague of justice, and we're just gonna wing it here. She preferred an interview format. So, but I know that the questions I ask may get changed because that's just the nature of the way it is. So, first of all, Judy, would you mind describing your own personal education experience in Jersey, New York, and California?
So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who put this conference together, and it was great to reunite with Kate for a lot of reasons. And Kate has this photo album that she has with her, and I'm sure she'll allow people to look at it. And one of the first pictures in it is of the opening of Negro classes for children with cerebral palsy. And I was laughing at it because I was going to special ed classes in Brooklyn, New York. I hadn't been allowed to go. Can you hear me in the back? No. Here. Take your mic.
Robert, where are you?
Is that any better?
Yes.
It is. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Start over.
I'll start over. But I want to start over by saying that it's been, I really appreciate the people who invited me down here, and it's been great for me to spend time with Mark, who we were discussing the other day, when are we going to see each other again? And it was fantastic to be able to reunite with Kate, who has been not only a leader here in Georgia, but in the United States. And when I was looking at the photo album that she has with her, there's an article in there about the opening of Negro classes for victims of cerebral palsy. So we can get into a whole discussion about that. But this was probably in the 1950s, and in Brooklyn, New York, the classes that I went to were not racially segregated, but I was also in classes for children with cerebral palsy, although I had polio. And my friend, who had muscular dystrophy, we used to joke that we integrated the special ed classes in New York City when people other than cerebral palsy got into these programs. But I hadn't gone to school in kindergarten, first, second, or third, or until the middle of the fourth grade, because as people have been discussing, there were no laws that required that disabled children go to school. And although when my mother took me to the neighborhood school, both my parents were German Jewish immigrants from Germany, and really had no expectation that the school system was expected to do anything. So she brought me to school, she pulled me up the stairs, and my presumption is she would have come and taken me to the bathroom and done anything I needed. But I wasn't allowed to go to those classes, regular ed classes, because I couldn't walk. And so this theme of you couldn't go to the same programs because you couldn't walk, or you couldn't do this, or you couldn't do that. And my mother and other mothers began to organize, and I think that's a really important theme in this, that I always like to talk to people about the role of parents, because there are disabled adults who really don't want to be working with parents of children with disabilities, or parents who have adults who now have, or have disabilities and are now adults, because some parents tend to not let go and can be all-consuming. But I've always felt that it's really important that we support parents, particularly parents who have children with disabilities, and that people deal with things at an age-appropriate level. And I think, Kate has mentioned her parent, other people have mentioned their parents. How many of you here are parents of disabled kids? How many of you are parents of non-disabled kids? So, there is a role for parents. My mother and some other mothers learned that after we had gotten into these special ed classes, and we were wheelchair users that couldn't walk steps, that what was gonna happen is we were gonna go onto home instruction again. So, home instruction, the first, second, third half of the fourth grade, and we were expected to go on home instruction to high school. Now, my mother and other mothers organized, and the Board of Ed made some schools accessible. But the other backdrop that's important to discuss is, when I started to go to school in the middle of the fourth grade, in these HC 21 classes, the school itself was for non-disabled children, and they went there through the sixth grade. And then in the seventh grade, they went to middle school. But for those of us who had disabilities at that point, the kids stayed in the program till they were 21. And then they went to sheltered workshops. So the fact that some of us were going to break away and go to high school was also very unique. So I was the first student in my HC 21 classes to actually go to high school. So I went to high school, long story there, but I wanted to be a teacher, and so when I was applying to school, my friends who were above me in high school, and I was going to be getting support from the Department of Rehabilitation, said to me, don't tell rehab that you want to be a teacher, because unless you can show there is someone else who is a teacher, who uses a wheelchair, rehab won't pay for you to go to school. So I did not tell rehab that I wanted to be a teacher, and instead I told them I wanted to be a speech therapist. And I minored in education. I had called the ACLU when I was a sophomore in school because I was afraid that
We're gonna do an accommodation.
ACLU said, take your classes, see what happens, and if there's a problem, call us back. So I took my classes, did lots of stuff at university level, and applied for my teaching credential, which again was before 504, 88, or any laws. So in New York, you had to take 3 exams. They were each offered in completely inaccessible buildings. I passed the oral exam, I passed the written exam. I was failed on the medical exam because I couldn't walk. That was the official reason that the Board of Education gave. I was very fortunate, I was able to get some attorneys, and we sued the Board of Education, and we had the first African American woman sitting on the federal bench as our judge. And so she basically encouraged the Board of Ed to re-examine what they did. So we settled out of court, and I became a teacher. I taught for 3 years. I was having great difficulty getting a job, both because of lack of accessibility in schools, as well as, I'm sure, basic discrimination. And one point that I left out was I did call the ACLU back when I was denied my license. And I said, oh, you told me to call you back, blah, 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 blah. And I'd like to come in and meet. And the guy said, I'll call you back. And he called back and he said they did not want to meet because I had not been discriminated against. I had been denied my license because I had a medical condition where I couldn't walk. And I said, that's discrimination. And the reason I want to raise this point, and we'll carry it forward through the rest of the discussion, is I think that one of the big issues that we're still dealing with is calling discrimination discrimination and acting on discrimination in a much more organized, forthright way. I think in many ways we're still relatively passive because we are victims of discrimination and marginalization. And I also think that you come in the state of Georgia where when you look at the piece that Kate has of Negro classes, that in and of itself talks about the degree of segregation that has occurred in Georgia and in many states around the country. And so looking at how we can be bonding together across the civil rights and rights-based movement in a more forthright way, I think is really important. because we're doing good work, you're all doing good work. A lot of it is really piecemeal. That's not a criticism of anybody. But I think we need to be elevating the degree of discrimination that occurs across the disability community and allowing like stories that are being told here, not just to be being told in rooms where all of us are very empathetic, we've all got our own stories to tell, but really in a way where we can be educating the leadership in the women's movement, the Black movement, the Latino movement, the Asian American movement, the Native American movement, sexual orientation movement, on and on, so that people begin to own those of us who have disabilities from all these different communities as a part of the bigger community.
So, as I said earlier, Judy has advised 2 presidents, actually more probably, but 2 officially. And from 1993 to 2011, Judy served as the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Special Education and Rehab Services at the Department of Ed. Now, remember, this is a woman that had a hard time finding a job being a teacher. And yet, she became an Assistant Secretary for the Department of Ed. What were some of the experiences and takeaways from that experience?
So, you know, you've got the state government, you've got various agencies like the Department of Education, and I don't know where rehab is here, I don't know if it's in labor. Where is rehab located?
It was in labor, now it's out.
Human services.
So it's got a human services.
And where is labor?
Labor.
Oh, well, that's a regressive step.
A couple people just put their face in their hands.
Whoa, that is really bad. But anyway, so the federal government has a structure somewhat like state government. There, as you know, there are many different agencies. And I got a call. Clinton was elected in 1992, and in the beginning of 1993, they started looking for people from many groups, including the disability community. I got a call asking if I would be interested in working in the administration. They have positions that are politically designated positions, and I never expected to get the call. And when I got this call, I thought, there's one job that I'm interested in, and I said, I'm interested in being the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Education for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. I was interested in that because it had the Office of Special Ed, where I had experiences both as a student and then as a teacher. The Rehabilitation Services Administration, because I'd also gotten services from them, and the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, because in the organizations that I had worked with in Berkeley, the Berkeley Center for Independent Living, and then I and 2 friends set up an organization called the World Institute on Disability, where we had also gotten funding from NIDER. I thought, well, I understand enough about each one of these 3 components under OSERS, and I really liked the fact that they would be under one umbrella, and so there would be a way of doing what some people today call intersectionality, what I talk about as coordination and collaboration. So I said to this gentleman, okay, I'm interested in this one job. I have no idea if you've already offered this job to somebody else. No hard feelings, but if it's not this job, I don't want to do anything. And then I got a call back not very long later asking me if I would come in and interview. So, you know, in relationship to Mark's question about what was it like, so part of what was going on for me is that I've been in Brooklyn, I've grown up in Brooklyn, I've gotten that Brooklyn spirit, which otherwise would not have carried me to where I am today. Then I went out to Berkeley, where I've been involved in organizing with the Center for Independent Living and the World Institute on Disability. My work has significantly been within the disability community. Our work was working with disabled people because we ran our boards, we ran our organizations. I had worked and done advocacy, getting disability included in many areas at local government and state government. and somewhat at federal government, because I'd also worked for a U.S. senator when I was in graduate school. But I was really nervous about going in and working in a big agency that was basically run by non-disabled people. And I was worried about losing my impact, and how was I going to do that? But I went for my interview, and the secretary was a gentleman named Richard Riley, who had been the governor of South Carolina, not a Republican, for a couple of terms. Also had a disability that he didn't deny. He acquired a disability during the Second World War, and for me it was quite noticeable. Nobody ever talked about it, but I did talk about it with him. And so when they offered me the job, I took it. It was a really great opportunity for me. It was a stretch which I really liked, and it was not only for me empowering the voices of disabled people and parents within the work that we were doing in OSERS. I had the opportunity of hiring senior staff, 3 of the 4 who had disabilities. That was another important issue, and the ability to be able to bring other disabled people into civil service positions, both diversity in race and disability was another big issue we worked on. And I would say in that 8-year period of time, the voices of disabled people and the voices of parents really were elevated. But one of the other, I think, very important issues is we were really looking at how to put a disability lens on the work that was going on within the Department of Education, like in the Office of Bilingual Education and Vocational Education and Higher Education, and in research, and also working with other agencies. The Clinton administration had about 40 disabled people that had been hired to work across government agencies. The Obama administration had done similarly. And so, while you never make the changes that you want, even though I was there about 7.5 years, it was a really good opportunity for me, and I think we really helped change the views of some of the federal workers we were going through the reauthorization of the IDEA in the 1990s, and the 1992, when Clinton was elected, we had a Democrat, Clinton, and the House and Senate were controlled by the Democrats. And in 1994, the House and Senate were taken over by the Republicans. I don't know what your party affiliations are, so I'm not saying anything disparagingly about Republicans, except the Republicans who were in at that time. One of their goals was to allow the expulsion of disabled children who had emotional disabilities to be put into the law. And that was not allowed at that point. And while there were some modifications that were made in the law that did weaken what we had previously, by and large, we were successfully able to keep the provision in that you couldn't cease services for children with disabilities based on whatever. Now, one of the big problems with that provision still today is that we all know that there are children who are being pushed out of school, being expelled from school. The laws are being violated, and the state government is not necessarily enforcing the law as it should be, and the federal government, which has monitoring responsibility in the area of education, likewise doesn't necessarily have the staff that it needs, nor the push to really be able to hold states accountable. So, one of the big issues that, lots of big issues, but one of the issues that started coming up as a result of what the Republicans were trying to do in 2006-07 to allow expulsion was I started visiting a couple of juvenile justice facilities in Maryland and California to get a better understanding of the population, and started talking with an organization that represents special ed teachers in juvenile facilities. And, there's work going on in Georgia and other states relating to the issue of education pipeline to prisons. And I think it's a huge issue, and one that I know many of you are working on it, but I think how we elevate this issue at a much higher level looking at how much is it costing your state dollar taxes to put children and young adults into juvenile facilities, how much money is being invested in the public school system. You'll see a huge disparity in that area. How are we taking that information and using it to allow the general public to have a better understanding of how these dollars are being misspent and the ongoing problem when we continue to misspend dollars. And when we know that at least 60% of the children in these facilities have some form of disability, I think it's an example of how we need to take information like any child who's got a disability needs to be identified, and if they're identified, they should be getting services. But many of these kids are not really being identified till they get into the juvenile system, which in many ways is very late because, you know, they're not consistently there. You don't want them to be, but so they're not getting consistent services. And when you go back, you may see that there was an IEP or there was a touch that there was an issue, but nobody followed up on it. So the role of parents and the role of educating parents and all of us looking at this issue, I think is very important.
Yeah.
So both you and Kate mentioned the role of parents. But let me back up a second. So you saw Eric's exchange with Kate, you know, and you know there's some school-age kids here, and there's some folks who are just recently out of school, some self-advocates. What advice would you give those self-advocates?
Advocacy is all about learning. And so I think it's an intergenerational issue. I think we need to be learning from, you know, students who are in high school early on, and to be working with families and with advocates. We shouldn't have to label a disabled person as a self-advocate. Because there is an expectation that non-disabled children are learning from their families to be able to advocate for themselves. It's an expectation. And we are hopefully working with young adults to help them look at career opportunities and what they want for their future. So sometimes unintentionally, I think we're putting up labels on people that are different than the labels that others get. And I think distinguishing, using those kinds of labels separates people out again. So I think, you know, one of the issues is what organizations are young people participating in where they're learning life skills, where they're learning how to make good decisions, where they're learning that in their decision making, it's what's going to go on in after high school. And that we need to also make sure that those programs are including disabled youth. I do believe that it is really important both to be integrating those programs with disabled and non-disabled people, but I also feel like it's important for not just disabled youth, but that's what we're talking about right now, to be able to spend time together. Because I think there are areas of discrimination that we as disabled people experience that are valuable for others to learn about, but there needs to be a time when we're not always teaching. So we need to be able to come together. I call it coming together to go apart. You know, the ability to come together and learn and talk to each other, strengthen each other, and then be able to go apart into these other organizations and be able to be a part of those groups. But I think not just younger people, but older people, and I'm now 71 3/4, and regardless of the age group that you're in, it's really, if you have a disability, or, I mean, we're talking about disability today, but one of the issues we've been talking about over the last couple of days is how none of us are just one thing, right? We have the sex that we've chosen, the race that we've been given, the religion that we may or may not choose, whatever it may be. We have multiple parts of ourselves, and I think more people are talking about wanting to be able to bring their whole self to events and their communities. And it's difficult in many ways to bring your whole self together, even just personally, your whole self, to be able to see yourself as all the different parts of who you are, and then to be able to bring them into a bigger community. So if they're, if you are an Asian, trans, disabled person, and you're going to meetings, and can you bring your whole self to those meetings if there are feelings in different communities about different parts of who you are? And so that's why I think, one of the things that we're really needing to be talking about more, and it won't really happen much today, but we really need to be getting down to a much deeper level of discussion about discrimination and how it impacts us. And how, we have friends where they may feel that we're discriminating against them for a certain part of who they are, and we may be feeling the same way from other people. And none of this happens overnight. But I really feel like we have to have open and honest discussions, and working with younger disabled people and younger people in general, they are exploring things in a way that's different than my age generation or people in their 30s, 40s. I mean, everything is changing so dynamically, and for me, I may be unique in this, but I struggle with all the new social media and how to use it and how to set a time, how to set aside time. I'm making decisions about, am I going to be looking at Facebook? Am I going to be looking at Instagram? Am I going to be looking at whatever new thing is out there? How am I posting? Am I looking at Netflix and all these new things that are coming out? I mean, it's just kind of overwhelming, but it's the way of the future. And so we need to be learning from them as they're learning from us. And so I think the term self-advocate, however it's used, I would kind of throw it in the garbage can, regardless of the age.
I know Kate in her piece mentioned something that you also talked about, meaning just having opportunities for us to be with each other. Can you talk a little bit about the movie that you're working on as far as?
These exercises.
So first, I have a book coming out in February. I don't talk a lot about myself in that context, but it's a memoir, and it's called Being Human. So you actually can go online now and look at it at Barnes & Noble and Amazon for a pre-order. And I just want to deviate for a second. Kate was talking this morning a little bit about her neighborhood and how she didn't feel different in her neighborhood until she left her neighborhood, and then other people looked at you differently. And I write about that in the book. It could have had Kate's name on it, how in the neighborhood that I was growing up, I never felt different, until one day when I was, my friend was old enough to push my wheelchair so we could go to the candy store, and some kid came up to me and said, "Are you sick?" And how that really kind of shocked me, because my family nor people in my neighborhood ever thought about me as being sick, but it was a very important time for me. Anyway, I did a paper for the Ford Foundation, which came out earlier this year. It's called, I always forget these titles. If you go to the Ford Foundation and put in my last name and ask for media, it's a roadmap to inclusion, changing the face of disability in media. And it's basically an analysis of representation of disabled people, or the lack thereof of representation of disabled people in media. And it also looks at other organizations. We narrowed down our definition of media because we had a short period of time to do work on this. So we're really looking significantly at film behind and in front of the camera. And what we found was that 2 to 3% of films depicted disability, and about 90% of those times disability was portrayed by non-disabled individuals. And we talked about how disabled people are portrayed as, we didn't write this in the paper, but basically hopeless, helpless cripples, which is a term that, you know, many of us have used in our internal language, I mean, amongst ourselves, not as a negative thing, but it's just kind of an honest way of discussing it, how people are depicted as evil people or godlike people. And then we look at these other organizations and the work that they've done to basically elevate the inclusion of other minority groups in media. And documentaries is one of the ways that stories of people come out. And we see them in the movie theaters, we see them on Netflix and Amazon, and on and on. So I have some friends who, one of them has a disability, and he was a sound engineer, an award-winning sound engineer. And he, like myself and a number of others, had gone to a camp upstate New York called Camp Jeanette. And he decided in like 2010 or 11 that he wanted to look at doing a film about the camp experience, because it was disabled people coming together, much as we were just discussing, and how having that experience was very important to us, and then following a number of people who went to this camp to look at what we've done over the course of our lives. So I'm one of the people that's followed in the film, as is he and a number of, as I said, 4 or 5 people. That film has been picked up by Netflix and the Obama higher production company, and it's going to be coming out in March. It's going to be in, I think, 142 languages, and it's going to be distributed around the world. And I think there are a number of things of note about the film. One of them is that it was one of, I believe, 6 films that the Obama company picked up in their first round. And so I think it both speaks to the quality of Crip Camp. It's called Crip Camp, C-R-I-P. And yeah, so, and it speaks to the Obamas themselves and the fact that they were willing to pick up a film like this. And I don't want to say willing in a way that the film isn't quality, because the reason they picked it up is because it's a very high quality film. But there are lots of high quality films out there, and so I think there's also a statement that was being made when they picked this film up amongst the other 5 really outstanding pieces that are going to be released. So one of the things that's going to be happening with the film is they've established a brain trust, and they're looking at ways of being able to use the film in communities around the United States to really advance discussion on issues like we're talking about now, using the film as an opportunity to do that.
I have other questions, but I know we have a little more time, and I just want to give the audience an opportunity. Has anybody got a burning question they'd like to ask Judy? Well, first of all, I'm really glad she came in Monday, because Monday she was able to tour the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, and then she was able to have dinner with some of the GAO staff and some of their friends. And then obviously yesterday she made herself available to the Georgia State Lynn and from the DD Council, the Lynn program, some of the leaders, new, young, upcoming, whatever, current leaders, Charlie back there, and Parker, and folks like that. And then obviously she made herself available to some students yesterday in the Disability Studies program here, and then wound up at dinner last night with some of the IHDD staff, whatever. So she continues to be available to have these kind of conversations. So anybody here have a question? Are you afraid to ask the question, or are you ready for that lunch break? Or way back there? Oh, I see a hand. Can we get a mic back there?
Does somebody have a mic?
I got it.
Oops, holding in front of the camera.
Here.
Okay. Yeah. So, I just wanted to tell you that I really think that you are doing amazing work, Judy. I am just really inspired by you and what you are doing. I think that this is all amazing. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and this is really important to me. So, a question that I have been really curious about is, have you ever been on any kind of media, any kind of like place where you can come and be interviewed based on your work? And what would it be like to have that chance if you knew of someone that could do that for you?
Well, if you volunteer to help, that would be
Because I want to ask you, and then everyone, I want you to come on Monday to Martha and get your voice It's got Monday to Martha! I'm so inspired. Really, I am inspired. And everything that you said was spot on. I mean, I really think that you really have a vision. You really have thought of it for a lot of your life, and I really want to see what I can do to help you in your work.
Thank you. So let me say that I certainly be happy to do an interview, and maybe we could do it over Zoom or like that. I also have a program called The Human Perspective, which you can, I don't know, is there going to be a mailer that's going to be sent out to everybody here after the, yeah. So I'll just make sure that my information can be put on that list. And we have a YouTube page called The Human Perspective. We've done about 70 interviews. Parker was one of the people. There's something called Drunk History. So Drunk History 504 is a story about me and other disabled people. I did a TED Talk, so as Mark said, you can go look at the TED Talk. And there's also something called Lives Worth Living, which is a film that the university does have. You can't get it on YouTube, but it's a documentary of the disability rights movement from the 70s to 2010, and I'm one of the people in that. And then there is something which you can get online. It's called The Power of 504, and it's an 18-minute documentary about the 504 demonstrations. So there's a lot out there. My brother wants me to get on The View. So I've done a bunch of TV work, but I haven't done anything at the level of The View. I've done Liz's Tuesday, and I'm Martha, happy to do your Monday.
Oh my God! Nice!
Okay, guys, somebody has that one question.
So, well, just as Judy mentioned, I know in 2012, when there's a group of about 25 folks from around the country, activists and some state agency people and some people that make documentaries and some historians and whatnot, we just talked about the value of collecting our content, our stories, and I know that Sheryl and Zo and others stepped up to create that collection here because, as Judy said, there was that film done, Lives Worth Living. It has now been broken down to an 8th grade version. It now has a curriculum, and it's now actually provided free of charge to educators in the state of Massachusetts. So these stories that I know IHDD and the DD Council, in fact the DD Council is engaged right, finishing up probably your storytelling initiative, but as Judy said earlier, where do those stories go? And what audience do they get put in front of? And it's nice for the choir to hear them, but can we get it beyond the choir, or can we get it in front of choirs that are very inclusive choirs that you know, can relate? Because Judy, you hit on it perfect, is our generation used things like working together, the collaboration. The language has changed, but the intent is still there, if that makes any sense.
So I think this is a very important point, and storytelling. How many of you have read stories to your children? How many of you sit at the dining room table or wherever and tell stories? How many of you take those stories and tell them on a regular basis to other people? Not all of them. Many people don't. You may have an inner circle where you tell stories, but I think the more painful and difficult the stories are, the less likely we are to share them with other people. You know, how many times has someone died in your family where you said, I really wish I would have asked them questions, because I don't know the answer to these questions. So storytelling doesn't have to be complicated. You know, you take out your smartphone and you interview someone. And I really think it's an important thing to realize that documenting those stories is important, even if it's just in your own family. But looking at ways of getting that information out. Like the work that I do and Martha does and others, it's a little bit more high-tech. A film like Crip Camp is much, much more high-tech, costs a lot of money, but it really doesn't cost anything for you to take out your smartphone or whatever you use and write down 3 questions, which can deal with discrimination, or it can deal with your experiences in whatever, good and bad experiences. And if you're doing it within an organization, like today, really hearing the stories that people have told, and as I was mentioning, how what Kate said was almost verbatim of what I've talked about, but Kate and I never had discussed these stories, and the common thread in these stories. That, I think, is all very important, because when people realize that the stories are not atypical, certainly there are atypical things in some stories, but many stories have very common threads. And you know, working with graduate students, undergraduate students at the universities who can maybe take it on as a project, but really looking at ways of telling stories and looking at ways of trying to keep those stories and share those stories is, I think, very important for the generation today and for the future, where work that you've done will not be known by others. And there's a value of people knowing what's already happened, so they're not necessarily recreating the wheel, but building on the wheel.
We have a question back there.
Hey, were you ever out in inclusive education program at Georgia State, and I was kind of against because of my disability. When you were younger, did anyone discriminate against you based upon your disability?
Was I ever discriminated against based on my disability?
Jimmy was saying that he was in a post-secondary program at Georgia State, and he was discriminated against because of his disability, and so he wanted to hear about if you ever had that experience.
So what did you do?
I pushed forward, even they threatened to kick me out based on my physical limitations. Based on my physical limitations.
I got a little of it. Could you repeat that, please?
So Jimmy was saying that he was discriminated against based on his physical disabilities, but he would just continue to push on, and then I think one of the things that Jimmy has shared is that many of his teachers would share that he wasn't smart enough, and he was in a writing class, and they were like, "Wow, you're such an amazing writer," and Jimmy was just like, "Yeah," and so it's like thinking about him in these ways beforehand that weren't true.
Yeah, so I think, thank you very much. That's a really important set of statements that you made. How people presume that if one has a disability, that one is not capable. I have so many things to say. First of all, this is a great story. Because it's a story which shows that based on someone's belief that because of Jimmy's disability, he couldn't be a good writer. And so I think telling a story about, and talking to people about, when you see someone who has a disability, what do you think? And I think really being able to get people to tell you, their name doesn't have to be attributed to it, but I think it's very fair to say that we all have our biases, and even if you have a disability, you may have a bias against someone else who has another type of disability. And being able to discuss it and really learn about it, and to be able to be working with the Jimmys of the world and supporting each other, I think is also very important. I've been discriminated against in many different situations, and my approach is always to try to deal with it like immediately. I've been involved in class action lawsuits in a number of cases. I've sued on my own in a number of cases. They've been attempts to throw me and other people out of restaurants, and I guess I'll tell you a story which I really resonate to. In California, there was a particular movie theater that whenever we would go, this is before the ADA, a number of us would go in wheelchairs, and they would tell us that we had to get out of our wheelchairs, and of course we didn't want to get out of our wheelchairs. And so we staged an event one night where about 3 of us in wheelchairs went to this particular movie theater, and we brought a number of our non-physically disabled friends with us to the movie theater. And we went to buy tickets, and they weren't going to sell us. They wanted us to say that we would transfer. And they said that they were going to call the fire department. And we said, well, sell us the tickets and then call the fire department. So they did sell us our tickets, and we did go and sit down, and they did call the fire department. And then the people that we had brought with us were sitting in different parts of the theater. And when the fire department came to ask us to come out and speak, everyone started going, psst, psst. You're distracting the movie. So we gave them our cards, and we said, if you want to speak, call us at the Berkeley Center for Independent Living. So the movie theater manager did take seats out without any other problem. That to me are kind of practical, and they may be somewhat different today because of some of the laws we have in place, but I really feel it's always important to say something right away, and I encourage other people to do the same.
We did it, Julian.
We did it.
Just a number of things. First of all, can we thank Judy? Yeah, she's going to be here, but she's going to say one more thing, and then we have a bunch of instructions.
I'm sure that many of your organizations have little films or little things around that you haven't collected. I think it would be a really good idea to do that. Adapt, which is one of the ways that I also got to know Mark. Adapt, which I'm sure you all know here in Georgia, but they are producing a set of documentaries. The first one is pretty complete. I don't know when it's going to get released, but it's a very, very well-produced piece, which I think is a very important part of the history of the disability movement, because it shows another very important organization and work that they've been doing. So, look at foundations in the state of Georgia that may be supporting documentaries, oral histories, various storytelling, get a better understanding, and maybe have some kind of a coalition. I know that Parker does a lot of work on social media through the Silk, and I'm sure there are other people that I don't know here who are also doing that, Marie. But maybe make a conscious effort, maybe look at doing something with your public television. Next year, as we noted, is the 30th anniversary of the ADA. It's almost a little bit late for programming, but you know, you really may want to get a cross-disability intergenerational group together. It may already have happened, to go to PBS and ask them what are they going to be doing next year for the 30th anniversary of the ADA. What do you want them to be sharing and documenting? But you know, we're now in November, and I really think NPR and PBS would be great entities to set up a meeting with much sooner than later, which would really maybe get a committee together that really could talk about messages of progress that's been made in the last 30 years and what more needs to happen.
Mark.
I think Parker's going to share something about ADA 30.
Apparently. Good morning, y'all. I'm Parker. I'm with the Statewide Independent Living Council. I'm their outreach coordinator. And I think it's important to note that the Silk is also here with a video team, or filming team. After 3 p.m. today, we will be able to record a few folks to interview, like Judy was saying, sharing their stories, how the ADA is impacted, what's going on or what's happened during the 30 years, and what it is that we need to do to keep everything moving forward, hopefully positively for us, right? And so if you guys want to share your stories, please either find myself, Kelly Ryan is over in the back, she's our marketing coordinator also on this project, and we will connect you guys with, our videographer. But also know that this video, hopefully, and other videos that we've shared will be debuted, I believe, at our February event. On February 20th, we'll be having an event at the Human and Civil Rights in Atlanta, but you guys can check us out online. And we do try to, like Judy was saying, we do try to keep ourselves up to date. So all of our information is up on our Facebook and our website online, silkpa.org.
There's also something, there's also something called Rooted in Rights. And I don't know how many of you know about it, but it's done by the P&A in Washington State. And sharing material that's out there, I think, would be really good. And I think it would also be interesting to learn from the Washington, it's the P&A, right, in Washington? Yeah, to learn about how they started it, what they've been doing, and see if that's something that you might want to start down here too.
So we're right at that noon hour, and first of all, can we thank all the support folks here? From whatever role you play, we appreciate it. Appreciate Brandon and Robert playing tag team on the microphone. Yeah, we'll work on that. But do you have the bell? Yes. You're going to hear this bell in about 14 minutes. Is that correct? 15, well, I'm saying you're going to hear it in 14 minutes because you need to be back in your room in 15. Bottom line, we caught up. We don't want to lose any more time. Lunch is real important. Look at the name on your badge. I mean, the number on your badge. I know we have people lining the back wall there, and there are probably tables up here that you're really supposed to be at lunch. So, Judy, we're back to Leslie mentioned it, or Judy mentioned it. Everybody here is on record. We have the entire list. We can share stuff. We can do the post evaluation. We can share the bios. We can share how you can get in touch with any of the presenters at any time, in any way. So if you have any questions, just make sure you don't leave here without asking. But so why don't you tell them what the lunch is supposed to look like?
Okay, so the lunch is in this room. On one line is all the main part of the lunch, and the second line, Sally?
While she's handing out the microphone, once again, to my left, I want you to visit the artwork over here. that tells a very powerful story. I know Robin's photos are out in the hallway now on easels. Yeah, Homestead at 20, which is 20th anniversary this year of Homestead. So there's some things to visit, take pictures of, post, and share during that 14-minute break.
Inclusion Press, which is the largest press in the world, offering books and videos related to supporting people to be true members of their community. We have desk copies out there in the hallway that you can look at and purchase at the end of the symposium with a check or cash, whatever. So take a moment, if you see a long line for lunch, wander out into the hallway and look at the things we've got, and then come back and get your lunch. Before I introduce our dancers by name, I wanted to mention that I chose this quote by Toni Morrison to introduce our dancers because it speaks to what we as children and adults desire, which is to know that we matter. And when asked how she became a great writer, what books she had read and what methods she had used, the Nobel Prize-winning novelist Toni Morrison replied, "That is not why I am a great writer. I am a great writer because when I was a little girl and I walked into the room where my father was sitting, his eyes would light up. That is why I am a great writer. That is why. There isn't any other reason." When I was a child, when my child was in school, I found myself pleading with teachers and counselors at times, a plea that so many other parents have said over the decades, just please, please don't give up on my child. And so in this dance, you will find that art bears witness, that hope is who we are, and that every life is a work of art. I present to you Francie Wallace, who is a retired teacher and director of the NAMI Players in DeKalb County. And Francie says that community building through artistic expression empowers the NAMI Players to expose the challenges and the grace of living with mental illness. And Mary Soleil is a self-made dancer, visual artist, and gardener. And at age 31, she says she has a new life because her anxiety and fear is transforming into courage. Wow. Yeah! And Mary says, "I mentor people like myself, and I will never give up on them."
Nobody likes anybody in special ed.
Good afternoon, honorable faculty, beloved family, and dear classmates. I have lived with extreme anxiety since childhood that has led to serious mental health disabilities, which prevented me from learning in school. In fact, every morning before school, I would throw up. Belonging is at the center of our hearts. Affirmations is a powerful thing in a child's life. As a disabled person, I gained confidence through my circle of friends, my teachers, who did not give up on me. Today, I am standing here, a high school graduate, ready to start a new life. As you can see, my anxiety and fear is transforming into courage. And I say on to you, my fellow graduates, the words of Helen Keller, a woman who was blind, unable to hear, and could not speak. Life is a daring adventure, or nothing at all. Never give up.
Pretty hard to follow. It's pretty hard to follow. Thank you. And you have both Mary and Francie's email on your sheet of speakers and presenters and facilitators. So please feel free to contact them if you would ever like a dance or performance such as this. They create all kinds of dances and performances and can perform anywhere. So, thank you for coming to Atlanta. I mean, from Atlanta to Athens to perform for us. I give you now Dana.
Robin Rain is an Atlanta-based award-winning photojournalist, documentary, filmmaker, and storyteller who produces content that challenges society's view on difference, and different covers a wide spectrum of the human condition. With over 30 years experience, Robin brings us Juxtaposition, a short film illustrating the educational journey of two Georgia students.
So I just wanted you to know this photographer and photojournalist, filmmaker, who I've had the pleasure of working with for 6 years at IHDD. And Robin, do you want to say anything about the film while the panel gets set up?
You weren't supposed to do this to me.
Yeah.
I met these two fabulous families about a year ago, within the last year, and the moms they just touched my heart.
Just come
up a little. Oh, sorry. And it's just such a privilege to be able to get into a story, and I immerse myself in these stories because they touch my heart, and if they touch my heart, they're going to touch the hearts of all those who see it. So it's just been a real pleasure to do these projects for IHDD, and they've given me such latitude personally and professionally, and I'm just very grateful that they've given me these opportunities to tell stories that start conversations and that really matter. And I love working with this lady. She is my. That's enough.
All right. Okay, thank you, Robin. Okay, Star?
Oh, she's right here.
Here is the microphone. I'm passing it to Star. This is Star Bruner, by the way, from the Georgia Council. And your position, Star, tell us?
I'm the transition specialist.
Okay, take it away.
So we can go ahead and sit down. You'll remember Liz from the video. She was Toby's mom, and then that's right. And we have Gillian and Todd. And then we have the infamous Martha Haythorne.
That's a good look.
Okay, great. So we just heard some great stories in Robin's wonderful video, including Toby's experiences with Georgia's elementary and middle school system. We also invited Melissa and Arturo to participate, but Arturo is doing so well in Arizona and he loves school so much he did not want to miss school to be here. It's great. So Liz, during those elementary school years, what were some things that you thought worked and didn't work as far as Toby's teachers and school were concerned? And you might remind us how old he is and maybe what part of the state you live in.
Hi. Okay, so.
No, it's okay. You got it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry. First off, Toby was going to be here today, and he just turned 16 and he ditched me. They moved the Halloween party from tomorrow to today, and I'm sorry, we didn't plan. So there was really no way that he was going to miss that, so I'm sorry, guys.
Hi. We have you.
You have me, which is slightly less cool. So we live in Roswell, and he just turned 16. So.
Yeah, and Martha, can you remind us how old you are and what school you go to, what part of the state you live in?
Yeah, so as Star said, my name is Martha Haythorne. So I am 19 and I live in Decatur, Georgia. I go to Decatur High School and this is my senior year.
And to round out the introductions, Darian, do you mind telling us how old you are, what part of the state you live in, and where you just graduated?
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Darian Todd. I live in Illinois, Georgia. My age is 23, and I just graduated from Kennesaw State University. From the program for inclusive learning and social growth that.
Heck yeah! Great. So I'm sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. So Liz, thank you for sharing your story in the video. Can you tell us about during Toby's elementary school years, what do you think worked and didn't work as far as his teachers and school were concerned?
I think a lot of it can be summed up to expectations. When you expect nothing, then it doesn't matter what someone shows you, it's still going to look like nothing. Toby started in the public school system at 3 on his 3rd birthday, along with a lot of other kids, and in his classroom, they were all given restraint chairs from the first day and buckled in from the very first day, and the parents were not. We were not told, and we had to give advance notice to enter the classroom. And as a mom experiencing this, you just don't know what you're not like, you don't have a kid and then know what your rights are. Like, it's through a process, and nobody was there except for like the 20 pages of double-typed legalese. No one was there telling me what our rights were, and so it wasn't until he realized that that if he played with a dirty diaper, that he would get to stay out of the chair for over an hour. And so that was his plan. And so we didn't find that out until that started happening. And one day I just kind of blazed past the front desk and just marched onto his room and saw what was going on and just raised a ruckus. And so
that takes bravery. I must say it. That takes bravery.
Yeah.
Martha said that takes bravery. Yeah.
Thank you. It's hard when he lived through a lot, and but overall it was expectation. As soon as he changed to a classroom that just had regular chairs, then they were like, oh, he can stay in regular chairs. He can pay attention. He can do all these things, but it continued. We'd move to another school, and we would get notes home like, next week is testing week, and we'd like you to just keep him home because we think he'll be too disruptive to the other class. And I would say, no, I'm not going to take him home. And so the aides would secretly send me pictures of them walking him around the exterior of the building in a wagon for hours because they were afraid of the noise that he would make, because he makes all sorts of cool noises when he's happy or mad. He experienced a lot in elementary school, and after many more shenanigans, what's that thing when you go before a judge? Yes, we had to do a hearing eventually because he started to experience intestinal organ failure, and he had to move to only central line feeding with a tube straight to his heart. They said that he could not come to school anymore at all, and they said that they couldn't service him, but that they could provide 1 hour per week of a home tutor. Meanwhile, he's the oldest of 7 children, and I work, and so I was like, how am I supposed to accomplish all of that? So we went to a hearing and moved to the most amazing middle school that we had ever seen. We just kind of left elementary school behind, whizzed past to middle school, and the very first day, he had the same IEP for over 10 years. It had never changed because nobody had ever seen him accomplish up to 80% or 90% of the goals that he had. And one of the very first days, a teacher who was his teacher for 4 years that we're still really close with, she said, if you will just show me your ABCs, I will never ask you your ABCs ever again. And he jumped right out of his seat and pointed to them as she called them out, and she was like, we are done with ABCs for your life.
Nice.
He was so relieved. And it was through the social community at school that he started to sign more, he started to use a speech device, he started to gesture. He now uses a combination of whatever he wants to use. And so we just offer it to him, and for whatever he's trying to convey, he decides at that moment how he would like to convey it, and we just roll with, it's Toby's world, and we just kind of roll with it. And it completely changed his life to be around his typical peers. And I was so bummed that we couldn't show the pictures because I don't know all the kids that are in the pictures, but he got invited by his peers to go to the 8th grade formal dance, and wore a bow tie and arranged it so that I did not have to go. And and one of his favorite peers actually got special permission to come back from high school to go to the 8th grade formal, so that he had all of these escorts that all wanted to go with him, and he totally rocked it in middle school because he was given the opportunity, and they didn't just shut him away. And now he's happy, and he's at a Halloween party right now.
So I know there were some challenges, obviously, during the elementary school years, and that the transition into middle school sounds like it was largely for much better. What has his new level of inclusion meant for your family unit?
A big part of it is that, so like I said, he's the oldest of 7 siblings, and because he was so isolated, he never got to practice the skills of not being isolated. And so he really, when he was out in public, he hated it when people would stare at him, but then he also didn't quite realize what it was that he did that made strangers stare at him. And it wasn't until he had peers just sit down and talk to him, and tell him, not tell him to stop, but just to tell him, I've never heard that sound before, or I'm not sure what that means when you do that, or I may look at you because I'm confused and I'm not sure whether you're happy or you're sad. And it wasn't until then, and that made a huge impact on his siblings, because even though they talk to him, siblings just don't hold as much weight as peers. They just don't. Especially since all his siblings are younger. If they looked at him, Toby was just like, whatever. But his peers talking to him, and it just made a huge world of difference in ways that I wouldn't have known. And in his earlier grades, they just always explained that Toby couldn't go on the whole school field trip, and Toby couldn't go to the assembly, and they would send home all these letters saying him and one other kid out of the whole school is not going on this whole school field trip because we feel he'll be too disruptive. But that was because he was never given the opportunity to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Were there any new challenges that middle school brought for Toby and your family?
I think not new challenges for him. Only new challenges for me because I didn't have to be involved as much. And I was used to just knowing everyone and knowing everything that was going on in his day. And I had the first experience of having this kind of oh, he doesn't need me and he's just going to go away and I'm not going to be staring at him all day and knowing what he's doing. So no, not for him. From day one and being able to sleep later, that was the best. I think the only, and I mentioned this earlier to our table, the only challenge middle school did have that may have just been specific to our family, but in our county, they had all of the region of schools. If you have a certain need, you have to be bused to the school that has that need. And so he had this great middle school that he did really love, was not our neighborhood middle school, and he had to be bused almost an hour to it every day. And my son, my next youngest son, really wanted to go to middle school with his sibling, and he was not allowed to. And we tried, and we petitioned, and they said that there was no, that he had no viable reason to switch from our home school to this other school, so that he could go with his sibling. And I think that was the only hard part, is that they're very close in age, they're only 14 months apart, and they had really expected to be able to do this, and I really kind of thought I could pull it off, and then they just would not let it happen.
Thank you. Martha.
All right.
What do you remember about your time in elementary school?
So, what I remember about being in elementary school was I was included with my friends. I actually at first I was new, so I came to Atlanta when I was 8, and I started the grade that I was in when I came here was in the second grade, and I went to Oakhurst Elementary School, and I was in the general classroom, and I was able to actually make friendships because even as a young kid, I still was social. Boy, I was, and I mean, that really helped me. I only made one friend in elementary school, but this friend was just phenomenal. She made sure that I felt included. She made sure that I understood what I was doing. She made sure that I knew what I was doing, because in elementary school there were some things that were different and some things that were fun. And then I went to the first and fifth grade, which was Glenwood Elementary School, and in Glenwood, I did get a few more friends. I even was in a Girl Scout troop during that time too. And that troop was, I can't describe to you how much I understood what family meant when I joined that troop. They embraced me from day one. I hung out with them. I had a lot of them in my class in 4th and 5th grade. And I stayed with them on through 4th and 5th grade. And they are my heart. I miss them. They just graduated from high school, but they are my heart, and I miss them. And they helped me be able to sell cookies. That was my favorite time, selling Girl Scout cookies, because they always said, "Mother, we need enough sales." I thought there was some that was smile, and they'll get the cookies for the nation. And it works. Because they made us get a lot of cookies. So I am just so beyond grateful for the friends that I made. I just really can't describe my Girl Scout trip, and I miss them every day in my life right now. I really miss them. It's on my heart.
Well, it sounds like you had a great social life.
Oh yeah.
Who could doubt it? How did you spend most of your day inside the classroom? What does your school look like for you?
You mean like in elementary school or right now?
In elementary school.
Okay, so how I spent most of my day in elementary school. So I would go to school in the morning. My mom and my dad would drive me to school, and sometimes when I was with my friend Amina would come too. My dad used to drive me and my friend right to Glenwood, and then in Oakhurst, so I used to go in this trailer bike. So my mama would do the steering, and I would sit in the back in this little stroller, and it was my favorite memory because she would always bring a snack for me after school. And of course, I love to eat that thing too, so she always had something for me to eat and drink, and we would sometimes buy comb, or sometimes I would have appointments. I would take it out of school for appointments. I had therapy that I went to, and I also had to do some IQ testing, like any of the students. I still had to do that testing, and I had a strong IQ because I'm smart, and I showed them that I can learn anything. I worked at it, and I never stopped being a good student. I love to learn, and I love school.
Does anybody doubt that? So Martha, were there any challenges you had to overcome as you moved into middle school?
So as I moved into middle school, the environment changed, because it hit 7th and 8th grade and everything. But so one of the challenges was at first it was kind of hard to make friends in middle school. I had one friend, Amina, as you mentioned, and that was okay, but I wanted to make more friends. I did have my Girl Scout troop, but in middle school, we were in 7 different classes, so I never got to see them that much often, and that was really hard for me because I wanted to be with them and I missed them, but I was able to realize that we are still friends and it's going to be okay, but sometimes we had to change environments, and it was okay. Some of my classes were really hard for me. One of my biggest issues is math. I struggle with math, and in middle school, it was hard. It was hard, and they didn't really know, how to accommodate me either. There were some days where they would be like, "Hey Martha, can you do this?" And they were like a big equation or a big graph. I had to identify the slope, and I didn't know how to do that, and it made me so sad. Like I was then a lot in cry because I struggled, and they said, "Stop crying, you can do it. Stop crying, you can do it." I couldn't, and I was like, how am I supposed to stop crying and do it when I don't have the fine motor skills? I can't read my pencil by myself. I don't know the number. Why are you making me do this? I can't think of the number. What in the heck is that? Like, I can't do that. But there were some classes that I was strong in. I am a really good reader. I'm an avid reader. I love to read, so I aced my class. And I love history. History was just phenomenal in middle school. I mean, oh my gosh. Like, I was in this amazing class. I was in this amazing class in my 8th grade year. I was on the same curriculum as everybody else in middle school. I was on the same curriculum, Gen Ed. And I remember from 8th grade history class was that I knew most of the things, and if any student knew how, like, I was able to tell them, you know, look at your notes. Even though if that was a teacher's notes, I would say, look at your notes, read it over, because you should know that Washington was the first president. And they would say, dumb. They'd be like, Washington is not the first president. He is the first president. Not in my mind. So I would also constantly remind my friends to look at their notes. Like, you had to do this. And there was sometimes this homework, but it was stressful. I thought they gave me Quizlet and things, and I had to look at the flashcards, and they would send me the word, and I didn't really remember the definition. So they would flip it to the other side for me, and see if I could bring that word from the definition point of view. Could I get that? And that was really hard because you never really had very good study guides for me. And one of the things that helped me is study guides. So they had to learn this so that I needed more study guides, because when you give me a study guide, it can take me a good about 3 days, then I'm ready for that test. I am ready to achieve, and every time they give me that test, I would pass, and I knew it, and you'd be like, how is he doing this? And listen to a student with Down syndrome that is passing this test. And I thought, I'm doing it because I want to learn. I like to learn, hands down.
Thank you, Martha. So, Darian, it's been a while for you, but do Toby and Martha's classroom experiences in elementary and middle school sound familiar?
Some familiar, but I had a different experience as it was a long ago. But I can go back for you guys. I will go back to 5th grade. I was still in elementary, still in they would have classes in the class, and we would do certain homework assignments, and I needed more help. So you would think they would have someone in the class to, an extra teacher in the class to help the student that needed more help to do the assignment, because you have to break it down for certain people that can't really comprehend just like that. So I was one of those, and then from there I would go to the special ed setting, and then I would just thrive there, and I would just go back and forth some days. Some days the teacher would come get me, and I would go to the class, and the kids in the class would try to help me, but I would be like, okay, you're helping me, you're telling me to do it. I'm like, okay, explain it, and then I would explain it, and then I would be like, okay, you're telling me your way that you know how. You're not really telling me the way that I can do the work and succeed in the assignment. But then I also had to take some assignments home, and my mom and my dad would try to help me to get the homework assignment done. And there are some days when I just couldn't comprehend on the stuff and get it done, but other than that, when I go to the special ed setting, I would just get the work done. Everything was different there, because the teacher that was there, she knew how she would teach me, and everything was great. And from there, it was tough, but I learned the stuff. And
Great, thank you. Sounds like elementary and middle school, everyone's kind of learning what types of supports they might need and how to ask for help from others, whether it be your peers or your teachers. But then we move into high school, and high school brings its own unique sets of challenges to any student's life.
So let's move on to Liz, and before we get to Martha's wonderful high school experience.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Liz, what do you look forward to for Toby as he transitions into high school?
I really enjoyed how amazing teachers have started to make learning things more functional for him and getting to be more creative. It's like, for instance, it makes a lot more sense to learn how it makes more sense to learn how to use a phone for FaceTime than to just point to a number on a board. And that's something that they started integrating early in high school for him. And it's so funny because the first thing they did was teach him how to FaceTime me. And we had to give him somebody else to FaceTime because he would get the number correct and I would, hey Tobe, and he would just boop, hang up. I see her all the time. And so we gave him other people to FaceTime and then he was way more excited. Which is, yeah, that's so him. But yeah, I just love that they start actually looking at the world around him and finding things that he wants to do. I mean, like he wants to be able to, use a remote to control Netflix, not just like use tweezers to pick up cotton balls and put them in a thing.
Yeah. So what do you want Toby's teachers and his school to know about him as he moves into high school?
That even though, it's so interesting because no matter how many times I say this, that even though he is nonverbal, that he understands everything you say, every single thing, and he retains it, and he will remember it for forever. And it's always, I always tell them this when he gets a new teacher, and then a couple weeks later they'll be like, oh, you were so right. And I'm like, yeah, you can't just like his teachers in middle school had the suspicion that he knew how to read, and so they would write notes on the board and tell him and say, Toby, your snack is in the third drawer of the teacher's desk. And they would write it up there, and sure enough, he always went to it. And the same thing goes that if you are talking, if you say things, you can't just say things like he's not there, thinking that he's not listening. And he has so much more than is on the surface.
Great, thank you. So Martha.
All right.
Our high school student, tell us about your high school. What were your classes like?
So my classes in high school, so I have 7 classes. So it's like middle school, but that's a lot of classes, And we had to move around the school a lot. So my high school is definitely big, so we had to move around a lot to get to our classes. And we have like a bell that rings if we're late to class, and a bell that rings, so there's a bell that rings if you're late, and there's another bell that when the class ends, you leave, and then I just stop doing it anyway. So I had 7 classes in school, and sometimes I would need more time to walk in the hallway because we have a lot of stairs in our school. So it was always important to make sure that I was walking to my classes, but I always made it there. And I had 7 classes. I took, let's see, so my previous high school life, I took drama, I took theater, which I loved. I took psychology, which I loved. Lit, I loved. History, I loved. Math, it got a lot more harder, actually. I can't believe I'm saying that because I was on the high school gen ed math curriculum. I was put in the resource classroom, but still, it was that curriculum, and it was like a headache. I just couldn't get it. And, we tried to explain to my math teacher that there were some accommodations that she had to do for me. And 9th grade, things were fine, but in 10th grade, she did not want to even give those accommodations. And that was really hard because I am trying to do my best in math. It's harder for me because I need one-on-one, but she didn't understand what that meant in 10th grade. She just completely lost it. I just had to tell her to have me in 10th grade. She kind of gave up on me, and that was hard. But then something that really was amazing was
my senior year, they did a single maker because senior superlatives. She wrote a really beautiful statement about me. So even though we went through that, she just loved me, even though she wasn't always right, wasn't always the best at times, but she still really cared. It was just, she just didn't know what was best, and that's okay. We all don't know everything about everyone, but we can't expect everyone to know you really well, and that's okay. And some other experiences I've had in high school was I was on homecoming court and prom court, and I was in 2 high school plays, and I was on a Special Olympics swim team, and I still am, and those things I'm just really proud of, because in high school, I got a lot more friends. I hung out a lot with them. On the weekends, I sometimes had to post hang out with them, but when they were not busy, we would, do what you guys do. Go see a movie, go out to dinner, and it made me so happy. I would come home every evening saying how happy I was. I was getting an experience, being out in the community with my friends, walking around the kid, eating crazy and burrito, my favorite restaurant of all time, or going to an ice cream place, or hanging out in my village where I live. This is just a small village called Oakhurst Village, and there's some restaurants that I really like, and for my high school birthdays, they would come up with me, they would come to my house, and they'd go up there for pizza, and it was so much fun because I had this group that I hung out with. I loved when they came for my birthday because we would just talk about how's high school going, what are we doing in our life, and it made me so happy. And I remember my Sweet 16 from the convention because in my Sweet 16 birthday, we all went out and then we came back, and my dad, he knew someone that made these cakes, and he, for us, this woman taught, she made me this amazing chocolate cake, and it was like a chocolate ganache cake, and it had like this ball in it, and it had marshmallow fluff, and it was the best cake in the history of the world. It was so good. Even my mom said, I don't want to cut into this because I'm afraid to damage that pink bow. And I said, you gotta cut into it. Give me the cake. Give me the cake. I was so ready for that cake. I was just ready for it. And I don't know our views at my friends, even to church. I super at church, and I went to Oslo High School. I was part of the youth group, and they were just so amazing. I went on the youth church with them. I was in the night to the ministry with them, and I never felt so happy going on to the nights. I learned so much about God, so much about what life is, so much about beauty. I'm just so grateful for that group, and I have graduated actually out of that youth group, and I miss them every day of my life, but I know one thing. It's time for adulthood. I'm ready to be an adult. Don't limit me. I am ready to show you. I want to be an adult. I want to achieve. Teach me how to achieve. Don't limit me, because I have Down syndrome. I have Up syndrome. Let's go.
A lot of my questions that I had about how included you were in your community. It sounds like you're the most included person in Oakhurst. So that was great, Martha. Did you find that you talked a little bit about some accommodations that were or were not in place in high school? Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
So some of the accommodations that were not in place was in math, for example. So every time we would go in, there'd be a warm up, and they did about 4 questions, and one of the questions would say here's the slope formula, y equals 10 plus 9. And so you had to identify it first, and then find it on the graph. And for me, I have a hard time with fine motor skills, so to get that formula, I would not know what to do. I'd have to have support knowing where it is in the graph, how to identify it, how to solve 2-step or 3-step equations. I could not do that because they were so concrete that I was really frustrated, and I told my teacher, Miss Lewis, how do I do this? I don't know how to, and she would explain it, but I was still confused because she was saying it in another way, but I just couldn't get it. So I would spend about almost the whole class trying to understand the class, and she was teaching the other kids. And I'm like, okay, well, why is he still teaching when there's one student who doesn't know how to do it? Like, can't you make sure that I am understanding what I'm doing?
Martha, you've never had trouble speaking up for yourself, have you?
I don't think there's ever been a dry eye in the house.
So, you have some, you're a busy young woman.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to tell us about what internships you're doing while you're wrapping up high school?
So get ready for this definition of busy. You guys might have, you guys might panic or some, but stay with me here. I have 3 internships, guys. 3 internships. Let me give you the gist. So on Monday, I interned at Tally Elementary School, and I interned in a self-contained classroom for young students with disabilities. I love the work that I'm doing there. It can be really frustrating at times, but I always make sure that I stay positive for these students because they need that positivity. So I make sure that they are positive, they are working hard and achieving, and I do what the teachers tell me. Sometimes they make me a little confused, but they always tell me what I need to do. So I know what I'm doing, and I'm working at it, and that's amazing. And so then my other internship on Thursday morning, I'm going to get into my last one after I mentioned this one because that is most important to me. So then I interned at the other school of Atlanta, which is like a private school for young students with physical and significant disabilities. So there are some with cerebral palsy who are deaf and blind. There are some with hydrocephalus. There are, so I am definitely around in the severe field, and I love it. I want to learn more about these severe disabilities, and working at that school has changed my life. I was a volunteer, and you know what, guys? I advocated for the internship, and I got it. I'm not sure about our internship because I love it. And so then, my last internship that I want to get into is the ARC Georgia. I am the policy intern, and okay, I'll wait that for 1 second. Okay, so being a policy intern, what I am doing is I go to the Georgia Capitol, the Georgia Dome. For those of you who know that Georgia Dome is always sticking up and it goes down in my funny. That's where I go to talk to my representatives and my legislators about bills that need to be advocated. For example, there's a bill right now they were advocating for racist law, like Elizabeth mentioned. Her son had to have an organ surgery, right? Right? Yeah. Yeah. So right now, believe it or not, guys, people with disabilities are not on the list for an organ transplant. So we are advocating to make sure that they can be on that list. So every day we have. I want to give a shout out to the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. They are really, really putting in that work. And Eric Jacobson, stand up, please. And then I did Mondays with Martha, and so I don't know if you guys have seen this. I mean, who hasn't? Mondays with Martha is focusing on disability policy. And what I'm doing is I bring in people and I interview them about their work in the disability policy and things that we need to be advocating for at the Capitol. And they come in and they answer the questions, and I put it on I don't put it on YouTube, I can't say that, but many thanks to IDEA to the state. They have been, my family crew, they have been outstanding, and it's an amazing director. I am so grateful for. He's putting in so much work, oh my gosh. And I'm going there on Friday to see them again. This will be great. And I know that she might not want me to do this, but I gotta have to say it. Thanks to my supervisor. I know she doesn't want to hear this, but I want to thank her. And there are no words to describe what I'm doing in Georgia. I mean, this has been something that I never thought possible when I was in middle school or high school at first. But when I first came in this, I didn't know what I was doing, but was having my family and Stacy and everyone, they really showed me what is possible. I won $1,000 to the disability policy seminar. That's how I got this internship, guys. I went to the seminar in Ireland, and I came back saying, I know how important this is. I want to work at this. And Stacy, she said, Martha, you're on. Come be a policy intern.
And I said yes because she knows she's been my parents for a long time, and she's been one of the women in my life that she's inspired me more than life. And I just can't thank Tracy enough, because thanks to her, I have done so much. She has done so much in my whole life that no person could ever ask for.
Martha, you're going to make Tracy cry?
Oh no! She's so close, Tracy!
Well, it sounds like you've been so successful in high school, Martha.
I've been so freaking busy. It's kind of hard. Sometimes my friends will text me on the weekend when I'm at the office and they're hey Martha, want to hang out? Martha, into the phone. And then I'm sorry, but I have to work. Give me a break, mate. And also, I dated in high school too. And I dated in high school, but we broke up because emotional things got in the hand, but it's okay. I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay, but I still love him with all my heart. It's never gonna be okay.
So, Martha, it sounds like you've had a full high school experience.
Oh!
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for moms like Liz as their children go into high school?
So, I know that Toby's going to be a freshman in high school, so I would say it's so important for him to make friends, and I know you are going to make friends too, and I guarantee he will. He's going to want to go to all the high school dances, and you're going to have to be ready to go out and buy him a tux or a suit to prom, because that's a thrill to watch your son and go to a high school dance, and it's a thrill to watch him go to a high school play. So make sure that there are some things in high school that he can do. Make sure that he can find a club in high school, because clubs are really important, and that's another way to make friends too. And there's someone that lives in high school that he can choose from. So it's up to him what other club that he's interested in. Let's give him the option of other things and see what he picks. I know that you said that he's not a lover. Have him point to the ones that interest him and see how he does in them. And if you have any questions for the teachers, have meetings with them, and make sure to always do an IEP meeting, because you want to make sure the teachers understand what accommodations you want to make sure that he's getting, and what accommodations that didn't work in the past that they can bring in. And I guarantee that he will exceed them in high school, because it works. I know that it takes time, but progress can happen. It will happen.
That's great advice, Martha. Thank you.
And then he'll find a girlfriend.
Then he'll find a girlfriend, she says. Darian, I'm going to move on to you and see what was your high school experience like?
It was very different from elementary. My freshman year, I was in the general ed setting, and then I moved to special ed, and I stayed there for a good while time because I liked the setting, and they gave me accommodations. They had a lot of teachers. They're helping me. All we need is help. It's all good. It's okay to ask for help. Nobody knows everything. And for that, I'm very grateful to have had a very great high school experience. I went to high school for 5 years, but I graduated in 2014. So I graduated in 2014. So yeah, I went back for 1 more year, and then that's when I decided to go to Tucson. So my high school experience was very great. I had general ed friends, and then I had special ed friends. So I was very social. I would talk to anyone. So yeah, that was my high school experience.
Do you have any advice for moms like Liz, whose children are moving into the high school setting?
The advice that I can give you is for you and your child is high school is a very different level of learning. So if he comes home and says something that I don't get anything, 9 times out of 10, he's telling you the truth, or he's telling you the truth that he don't get it, so he might need some help. And it's okay to ask for help if he doesn't get things, and just enjoy it, because high school is only a one thing. When you're in high school, you have all the fun you need, but make sure you know how to balance that, because you can't just not graduate. You gotta graduate, you gotta do the work, you have to meet new people and stay focused, because staying focused is the main part. High school, and yeah, that's the advice I would give him. Just let him grow into his own person.
So, Liz, what are you most hopeful for Toby after high school?
It's so amazing to think about it, because when he was younger, we had this really narrow view, like he's just always gonna live here and he's just gonna always do what we do, and now I'm just thrilled that he has so many avenues to express himself, and he's able to make it very clear that what types of movies he likes and what types of things he likes to go to and not go to, and so I can't wait to just see all of the ways that he's going to be independent that just haven't happened yet, that are all available to him, and I'm just really excited. And every day he's teaching us more about himself. Like bowling, not a fan, pretty much thinks that's a chore. So, and every day we learn new things, and I love that.
Great. Has Toby shared with you what his plans might be for the future?
Yes, he is right now. We're trying to see how creative the school system can be with their work programs, because he really wants to work with animals. And so, yeah, doesn't that sound fun? Yeah. So he really wants to work with animals, and I'm so glad that he was able to self-advocate. He does not have to have a central line anymore, but he will always be a G2 fed kid, because the rest of this system just doesn't work. And he very clearly was able to communicate that he does not want to work in food service as an individual who doesn't eat. So, and he was abundantly clear about that. Yeah, and that was the main way that kids work in his school. And so I'm really glad that he sent them back to the drawing board to go figure out something else, because that just stinks. I don't want to make coffee and hand out donuts when I can't.
Donuts!
I get that.
Sorry. I love donuts.
Donuts are great. So yeah, so he wants to work with animals, and he's very, he likes feeding animals, just not people.
Great, thanks Liz. Martha.
Alrighty.
What are your plans for after high school?
So I'm really excited to tell you guys this. I'm graduating this year. And I will be applying to post-secondary programs this year. I have applied to Georgia Tech and to the state. And in fact, the exciting thing tomorrow is with my mom and I are going to go and get my application off at Georgia Tech. And I cannot get them enough. There are some times where the application process, it was hard at times, and sometimes we really got emotional. We really got emotional over the application, but I still love my mom so much. I really want to thank my mom right now for everything that she's doing. She's making sure that she's treating me just like my brother, because he had to apply for schools too. So it's no less different than my brother applying. It's no less different because I need to learn how to have these expectations, and my mom is teaching me how to have these expectations, and that's good because I don't want to be babied over the application. I need them to know I actually write down the things I've done and that were successful and were unsuccessful, and that's okay. Because sometimes I would sit down, then turn another leaf, and I keep trying, and it's been really successful. I am really excited to go to college and experience college parties. I am really excited to get that chance that other people don't get to have, and I hope that I can encourage, and I hope, this is my biggest hope, to continue to influence Georgia, and hopefully to get a paid internship was to do the counselor. I mean, working on the counselor would be like a dream, making with Eric and Alyssa every day. Oh gosh, that's gonna be trouble, but fun.
Awesome, thank you, Martha. Can you hear that, Eric?
Yeah, Eric. You had me look it up for you.
Thank you, Martha. Martha was talking about the inclusive post-secondary education programs, or IPSEs as some of us call them. These programs provide opportunities for study beyond high school to students who historically have not been able to access these possibilities. So these programs change lives by making college accessible for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In Georgia, there are 9 of these IPSE programs, including some of the ones Martha mentioned, so Georgia State's Ideal program, Georgia Tech's Excel program, and there's one here at UGA, Destination Dogs. And as Gillian mentioned at the beginning, he participated in one of our IPSEs in Georgia at Kennesaw State, which is also my alma mater, Go Owls.
And there's someone here from Kennesaw, Charlie Miller.
And of course, Charlie Miller is here from Kennesaw. There's a lot of us owls here. Hooty hoo. So, Darian, when we first spoke about you participating on the panel, you said something that surprised me. Can you please tell me how you first learned that college might be an option for you? We've got time.
Okay. When I figured out college was, at first I didn't think college was for me because I was coming out of high school and having dyslexia and having a disability. College is a whole nother ball field at that, and I was skeptical, but I didn't like that to overrule my life. So I found out about Kennesaw's program, and I went to go visit their campus, and I fell in love with it, and I went there, and they gave me a lot of accommodations. They gave me mentors to go to classes with me, and after those classes, we would go back to a study session, and they would break down the stuff that we would talk about in that class, and we would make sure that we get all the assignments done. Just to have that support in a class and a big class setting at that is amazing. To give those accommodations to a student that need them is a big help. To help students with disabilities to succeed and not just be like, okay, we're gonna put you in this class. We're gonna see if you can succeed, and then they see you don't and not do anything about it. That's crazy. But when they give us accommodations, someone to help us, then that's where we can show our strengths and our weaknesses, and we can work on those weaknesses as well throughout the program. So my college experience started to.
You're doing great.
My college experience was really good. I had a lot of internships like she did. I had like 3, and it was busy, but it taught me a lot about time management and how to manage my time, and it taught me how the world was going to, how to survive in the world, because when you get into real life, after college, it's not the same when you're in college. It's a totally different ballgame. You have to learn how to be patient and know when you apply for jobs, they're not going to get back to you on that exact day of the following things that you want them to do. They're going to get back on their time, not on your time. And with that is just keeping faith that you're going to be okay and have that support system. Because if you have a great support system, you're going to be okay. And my parents, they're my best friends. They're my family. They're my everything. They've been there through thick and thin, everything. Just all the things that they've done. Just everything they've done. And yeah, just keep the faith. Don't give up. And when someone tells you you can't do something, don't listen to them because you can do anything that you want to do in your lifetime. It's not about what we can do. It's not about what they think we can, what we think we can do, but it's what we're going to show you what we can do. And when we show you what we can do, it's going to make you be like, okay, so we gonna give you something and you're gonna roll with it and you know what you're talking about. And with that being said is enjoy life, don't stress. Life is stressful sometimes, but you have to learn how to manage it at your own time. And when you work hard, good things come. And yes, that's all I have to say on that.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like you had some supports in the classroom and around campus. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
The campus life, I can tell you about the campus life and how much support I had. On campus, I stayed on campus. It's the best thing to me to stay on campus. It gives you that independence to explore things and find and figure out things that you know from what you know and make your own beliefs and take classes that you think you wouldn't take, that you thought you wouldn't be taking in your lifetime. There's a lot of classes you can take in college, and just managing your time, because some days on your schedule you'll have a class at 9:30. You wake up and you go to that class, and after that class you have a study session that lasts until like an hour, and after that it's up to you to do whatever you want, and that's when time management comes in, and you have to figure out what you want to do between that bracket in your schedule. That's up to you to decide. Are you going to study some more? Are you going to look into other classes that you haven't paid more attention to than what you've been paying attention to? It gives you that time to balance what you have to focus on, even though you focus an hour of studying on that class that you just came from. And after that study session, you have to make your own study session. Just because you have that study session scheduled into your schedule doesn't mean that's the only study session you're going to have in that day. You have to figure out what you have to do in that class that you have the next day. You might not have a class the next day, and that's good. And you can just walk around campus, hang out with friends, or you can study for another day. But saying college is a very good experience to have. I think anyone with a disability that thinks they can't succeed in that, I think you should look into it and see what you get out of it. And you don't have to stay on campus. That's a family choice. If you choose a college that have a program and that's close to where you live and you can commute, do it. It's just having that experience and not thinking you can't do something, but you can do it. You just got to put the work in. If you want to be the next Shaquille O'Neal, go ahead. Do it. It's not that you cannot have I can't. It's always I can and I will prosper.
I love that. Thank you. So it sounds like you learned a lot of things, the same things that everyone learns in college: time management, organization, social skills, actual academics. So what else has the college experience at Kennesaw prepared you for?
The experience at Kennesaw, what else they prepared me for was not being so close-minded to everything. Not saying I was that before. It's always good to stay open-minded, because you can learn a lot of things just by listening and going to it and hearing what that person has to say. When I think of college, it's like a melting pot of a whole lot of different cultures and where they come from and how they learn things, and just to talk to those people and see what their act is on life and what things experience them and what you tell them and how they experience you. And with that, there's a lot of clubs you can do. You can do a whole lot of visual things in college. You just have to stay open to. If you don't want to join a club, that's your choice. But you can travel. You can do study abroad and all of that. I did a whole lot of traveling. My dad can tell you. I did a whole lot of traveling. My mom could too. But there's this one place that I thought I would never that I thought I would never go. I went to Dubai.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I went to Dubai with the academy, and we went there and we visited different sports facilities. And among that, you learn. I went over there and I learned a whole nother different culture. And you learn the things they do here, we probably don't do there. And the things that we do here, they don't do there. And that's okay. That's just a whole nother culture. And if you wanna learn more about that culture, you can read up on it. But myself, being there is good enough for me. And seeing how they live, and it's a really good experience. We just visit different sports facilities, and we had meetings with their University of Chargers. That's what they call their college over there. It's a beautiful campus. We just talked about the program that I was attending, and we just told them what is the life of an academy student at Kennesaw. We just told them the whole snippet, and telling them that we give accommodations and we help a student that needs help, and we show them how to plan and set out time to do things that they need to do, and how to succeed, and checking your emails. They did a whole lot of things. You learned that in college too, how to check your emails, because in real life you gotta check them. You gotta check it. And there's this one thing in the academy that the teachers they would send our homework assignments through email, or they would contact us through email. Like if they're not going to be in class that day, and there'll be a substitute, or they'll cancel class that day. If you didn't read your email, you'll show up to class and you'll be the only one. And you can look at your email at the last minute and be like, oh, so there's no class today. I'm that odd person out. I'm that odd person out that went to class, but there is no class at all. So it's very important to check your emails. And college also taught me how to manage money, because when you,
Ooh, that's big.
oh yeah,
That is big.
yeah, that's real big. Because it taught me how to manage money. Because when you go to college, believe it or not, everything ain't free. Everything is not free. It's not. You gotta pay for books. You have to make sure you manage your money. If you need food, go grocery shopping. Make a list. Go to the store and pick out the things that you need that you can eat on or snack on throughout the week. Because even though they had a nice dining hall, it might not be open during the week, and you need food to survive that day. And there'll be some, like in the winter, through various falls of the day, like winter, coming Christmas. I know that when Christmas come around and everybody's going home, and the dining hall, they would be closed. And you either walk off campus to go get something to eat, or you eat back at your place. And some people will walk off campus. I walked off a few times. Just go with my friends and, hang out and eat and reminisce on things that we did the next day, and what homework we did and everything. So time management, college teaches you that, and managing your money and managing your time. All those things, disability or not, everybody's going to need those things to survive life. If you don't have those things, how are you going to survive? Not in the sense of, no, just in the sense of that. How are you going? Yeah. How are you going to survive in life if you don't have those? If that person with a disability or with not a disability, how they're going to survive if they don't know time management and managing money, because when you're gonna want to move out of your house eventually. I want to move out eventually, but that takes time. but my dad is like, you're welcome, but I'm working on it, so.
So with that in mind, what are you looking forward to now? What's next?
What I'm looking for right now I'm looking for a job. My dream job is to be an advocate for people with disabilities.
Oh, how convenient.
Gary's in the right room for that.
And I would like to work at GCD.
What?
Be on the council for that. Going to schools, going to elementary schools and middle schools to talk about post-secondary education, because me, on the other hand, I don't think enough people know about programs like that. You can tell somebody what school your kid goes to, but then they say, okay, cool, they go to Kennesaw, and then you tell them they're in the Academy for Inclusive Learning, and then that's what they do. They're like, what's that?
Yeah, so going back to what surprised me when we first spoke is you told me, and I don't know if you remember this, you found out about IPSI options in your very last IEP meeting.
Yes, I found that out in my last high school IEP. And I was surprised, because at that time I was like, I remember it as clear as day. My mom picked me up from school and I was in the front seat, and I said, Mom, I don't think college is gonna be for me. And she was like, okay, well, we'll figure out something we can do to help you be successful in life, and we'll figure out something that'll suit you. So I think it was the next day I had my last IEP meeting, and they told me that they had a program at Kennesaw. It was called the Inclusive.
It's a long name.
It's a long name. It was that program at Kennesaw, and I went there for the summer intensive. It was just a crash course of going there, visiting the campus, showing us what classes, what buildings we're gonna go to in our classes, because there was a lot of buildings and you will get lost on that campus. Yeah. And they have a big gym, and I went to the gym a couple of times, but I had classes that were halfway across the campus, and I would just be like, I got my workout for the day. I'll have my workout in for the day. So just walking to the classes alone was a workout. But back to the classes, like, I didn't think I would be in the classes are big, and that's scary for some people that have disabilities. And it's normal to be scared, because the professor in that class will talk fast because they're on a time and they have to get the class out at a certain period of time. And they'll be talking fast, going through the lecture, and you'll be like, and you'll be writing notes. And that's where that mentor came in handy. They will take notes for you, and we will break it down in the study session and everything. So just to be in that general ed setting, it helped a lot. It was included. It was really nice.
And that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask everyone as we close. So the topic of our panel is All Means All. So we're here today discussing inclusion in educational settings. So I have this one last question for everyone, and I'm going to start with Liz. What is the number one thing you think a school can do to make your son feel included?
I think having an inclusive setting at every homeschool is a big part of it. Now that my son is going to be a freshman, is going to be the first year that he can go to the same school as his siblings, and it would have been really amazing if that could have been like that all the way through. And also, from day one, students need to be, regardless of what level they're on, students need to be integrated with all of the rest of their peers, and be able to ask questions. And I mean, a lot of experiences can be a lot of negative experiences, I think, can be shut down just by giving people the opportunity to ask questions and gain understanding about why, you know, I mean, it made a huge difference for Toby, who is not shy, that he is incontinent, but it makes a huge difference for him to be able to explain to peers that it's because he lacks muscle function and not ability, that it's not because he's a baby, it's because that muscle just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference.
Thank you. So Martha, what do you think is the number one thing a school can do to make you feel included?
Okay, so the number one thing a school can do to make you feel included, you want to get to know your teachers in particular, because your teachers want to make sure that you are being successful in whatever school that you're in. So whatever school that you're in, you want to make sure that your teachers understand what are your goals in your IEP, what your accommodations in the IEP, and to always follow what the IEP says. Don't go off the IEP. If any new goals or new accommodations you want to put in the IEP, you can do that. You can do that. But if you don't use the accommodations or goals out in the IEP, expect the parents to come in and have a meeting with you, because they want to be able to say, your child is trying, my child is doing the best they can, you're not modifying this, you're not giving them this goal, you're not giving them this expectation. It's your job as a teacher to give the expectations, to show them that they can achieve in school, to make sure they understand what they're doing, to make sure that they are learning in their classes and understand what they're doing in their classes and how important it is in these classes to learn, have fun, make friends, join clubs, and as long as you keep doing that, high school's gonna be a breeze.
Thank you, Martha. And Darian, last question goes to you. What is the number one thing a school can do to make you feel included?
Number one thing a school can do to make me feel included, or any students feel included, is any school that can make anyone feel included is making sure that teacher knows what that kid how he learns and what helps him understand the thing that they're going over in that class. Don't make that kid feel so left out, like, why can't I understand this? Have that teacher know how to deal with a student with a disability, because there are a lot of teachers out there that don't know how to deal with it. And that's okay, but you should learn, that teacher should learn how to deal with a student with a disability, because if she don't know, she's just gonna be like, okay, maybe he's just acting out. And that's not the case. He learns on a different level, and that's okay. You just have to break stuff down for that student to understand how he can get his work done and how he can succeed and how he can go on in life and do more than he thought he could do possible. And that's what I think a school should
Thank you for participating today. Everybody give a little more round of applause.
Leslie. Thank you, Liz, Martha, Darian, and Star for pulling together your panel and supporting your panel so well. It was delightful and very energizing to hear you all and your experiences, and we wish you much, much luck for the future. We are now going to have a presentation. And I would like Mark Johnson to come up to the front of the room. Before I do the presentation, I have 4 things to tell you. One is, please make sure you put your address on your postcard. You'll get it in the mail in a couple of weeks. Number 2, you have evaluation forms on your table. Some of them are pink and some of them are white, but you can tell it says evaluation form on the top. Please fill it out. It helps us plan for the next year's symposium. Number 3, if you would like to buy any of the books on the table outside, please just leave a check. Take the book. There are some free monographs right on the table, right there, by a man named Gary Bunch, who is from York University in Toronto, being worked with Hmong inclusion for over 30 years. Those are free. You can take one. And number 4, Parker. Where are you, Parker? Well, anyway, if you would like to be interviewed at 3 o'clock for the ADA 30th year anniversary video that Parker is making with the Center for Independent Living or the State Independent Living Council, please, I believe, go across the hall. And we would like to make sure you have an opportunity to be interviewed. Here's Parker. You can come to Parker and tell Parker you'd like to be interviewed. So I have an exciting thing to do before Judy comes to give us a call to action, and I believe, Judy, you're going to have more than 8 minutes, so you can take whatever time you want up until 3 o'clock, and if you decide to end before, we'll have more time for networking and conversation. So Mark, come over here.
Over here.
Yes, please.
Red Rover.
So, as many of you know, and there's a slideshow coming up, Mark just retired from Shepherd Center as the Advocacy Director, and they made this wonderful video. This is Mark's career through the years. As you know, Mark was one of the founders of ADAPT and has made an enormous contribution to us in the United States and across the world, I believe. I am getting ready to announce an award that we're going to present to you, Mark. It supported this award 6 people to go to an ADAPT action in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. The ADAPT group visited more than 10 congressional offices. They visited the Federal Emergency Management Administration to demand that they stop sending people with disabilities to nursing facilities when disasters occur. They visited the Border Patrol to demand they stop putting kids with disabilities in cages and kids without disabilities in cages. And they also visited the Housing Urban Development to advocate for them to provide integrated, accessible, and affordable housing and visitable housing. So we have kept this a secret for months. Maria, you got it? And we want to...
It's like I get to hold some little, like, check or something?
Yeah. So this is my big check.
It is a big check.
We raised, with people we invited to contribute, remember we had to keep it a secret, for Mark. We raised $3,400 to support people that need that So we wanted to honor you, Mark, and say we love you, we appreciate your contribution, and you're something else. Do you want to have a word before Judy?
It's going to be brief, yeah, right? I always, this is a great opportunity. I mean, some of you know that my wife and daughter and I have been in Georgia since '86. And there's some great memories. I retired in March, Susan retired in July, and we closed on a house November 25th, and we moved in mid-December to a suburb of Grable, South Carolina, where my daughter and son-in-law are, and then we relocate my in-laws. So right now our intent is to get family all within an hour and a half of each other. So when people say, how's retirement? I said, call me next March. But I just want to thank everybody for being here, but I also want to thank, there's a lot of people in this room and beyond this room that have made me look very good over the years. I like to stir and connect, but then I like to just step back and watch things happen. And today was a reminder of how important it is sometimes to just step back and let things happen. There's some great people in this room that are going to take this agenda forward. And one of my mentors taught me something long time ago. It said, until there's an emotional change, no intellectual persuasion is going to work. Yeah. Until there's an emotional change, no intellectual persuasion is going to work. And so that history that Leslie gave of policy stuff, and all that history that we've learned today, it all starts with a relationship that's critical, and a relationship that is going to change that emotion, change that attitude. And at that point, all will mean all, and we'll all be part of the community. So thanks for this award, because that doesn't raise money either.
Sit by the check.
So first I'd like to thank you and everybody who's been working on this event and the work that you do before today and the work that you'll continue to do. I think this event is really intended to bring people together to recharge your batteries and not to rest on your laurels as a result of today's activity. And I really want to thank Mark for the great work that he's done. And I wanted to joking with him about what he's going to be doing in this little rural community in South Carolina. So my bet is that he will be back here. Especially since he told me that his wife is going to start coming at least once a month to do some volunteer work on a new program that she's starting. So I think he's not going to kind of go off into the rural community of South Carolina. Coming from Brooklyn and New York and San Francisco, I've always lived in urban areas. So I know there's a lot of work to do in rural areas, and they're very important. So, but let me just say that when you leave the conference today, it's really important maybe for you to privately write down something that you're taking away, what you're going to do that you weren't thinking you were going to do before you came here today. And the speakers were great. The last panel was really great. The film that you had with the two parents speaking about problems they were having kind of really pissed me off. Not because of what the parents did, because obviously they were completely being screwed over by the system. But I think what's important is films like this should not be shown like this. Because for me at least, I took away that it was the parents' responsibility to make change happen. And that the system was continually telling them that they were not going to serve children, their children. And they were doing things that were totally illegal. So I have no idea whether anyone filed a complaint with the school district or with the state government or with the federal government. But those kinds of actions, obviously the parents are to be praised for the work they've done and for helping their children move to a different level. But that's really the message that we want to be giving, is that in this room and with all the organizations you represent, you really do know what is legal and what's not legal. And when something as gross as this is going on, where families are being told they will not serve, and where they will not serve their children, and when the school systems are so violating the law in relationships to restraints, etc., it's something that needs to be dealt with. And so I don't know if anyone here, I presume this is not a situation of just these two families. It's not something that happened and is all over because these families learned what to do and how to fight the system. So you know, for me, you know, what is going on and what are you asking of the State Department of Education, which has the responsibility for monitoring what's going on in these school districts? And what are they doing and what records do they have? And someone told me you've got the strongest law in Georgia on restraint issues in schools, but I don't know when the law was passed, so maybe it was passed after these things happened. But the bottom line, something is really not working. And I really feel like, you know, a committee needs to be formed, something needs to happen. The State Director of Education's got to be met with. You need to show her this film, which he or she maybe knows about or doesn't know about, but they have to be held accountable. You know, I mean, this is really, it's inexcusable, and you should be writing to the Department of Education in Washington. You know, you should, it's really, the Department of Education in Washington has the legal responsibility to be monitoring what the Department of Education is doing here at the state level. And the state level's got, the State Department of Ed, it's got the responsibility to monitor what's going on in the school districts. So if these are two documented examples, how many other people do you know are having this problem? And how is this being presented? So I don't mean to be going off on it, but to me, I do mean to be going off on it, I guess. But, you know, and you know, and I don't know what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but obviously many of you are really very engaged, or you wouldn't be here. But I don't think you can allow these kinds of things to happen. And you know, you've got two examples of children after their families were able to get the school district to do the right thing. We're clearly showing what their kids are able to do. So, and they're white families,
Yes.
right? And so other families, for whatever the reason, don't have the time, the ability to be able to do this. These kids are being totally screwed.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I take away from this. And you know, in our jobs, we've got defined tasks of things we need to do, which we have to do and need to be done. But I do think we need to take a little breather on issues like this and really look at what needs to be done and which legislators you're meeting with, and do some, you know, unannounced visits to schools. Where, I mean, when I was the special ed director and I visited schools, I did do unannounced. I would go to school X and they would have, you know, an assigned path for me to go on, and I always went off that path. I always went to rooms that, oh no, you don't need to go there. And when I would go to some of those rooms, I would find all kinds of things that were going on, including in a school, I don't know if it's Kentucky or where it was, where we went downstairs and found all this terrible stuff going on in the area of restraints, and, you know, went in. They couldn't stop me from going in. So, I mean, it's a violation of the law. Criminal action should be brought against people. So I think, for me, you need to be energized around this. And as I was saying earlier, it's also looking at other organizations that maybe are not dealing with issues around disability, but getting some of these groups that may already be involved, more involved, and bringing these types of things to committees, which you may already be doing. I don't know what it is you are doing. I just know that many of you are doing some really good work, but this documentary is really, it's a great documentary because it clearly shows the failure of the system, and the failure of the system to hold itself accountable. And so I think it's really a way of, you know, taking this, analyzing it, and looking at what you want to do as a result of this. And you have to make those decisions, but it's happening so obviously here, but it's happening in so many other ways. And, you know, that's ultimately what you're all about. You're working really hard, you're batting your head against the brick wall in many, many cases and many situations. And so, you know, we wind up working on issues that are important, and you can turn around and say, I've helped this person, that person, the other person, are all important. But at the end of the day, when there are systemic issues like this going on, there really is a need to make sure that situations like this are being addressed. People like Bobby Scott, who's the congressman out of Maryland, who's in charge of the committee that deals with education, including special ed, sent him this book and go visit with him. He's great on these issues. He was a member of Congress when I was at the Department of Education. He was great, and he associates himself with disability-related issues. And he's been one of the sponsors in, I think he's in Virginia. But anyway, he's been one of the members that has been fighting against 14C to be able to get all people being paid appropriate wages and work. He's a really good person. If you have some members here, both state members and congressional people, that you could take this to, but I would really, in an organized, thoughtful way, with the lawyers that you have and the parent advocates and disabled individuals, really be looking at what you can do to make this an example of not only what the problem is, but that you're not going to accept it anymore. I think that's really what's very important. And you've laid out many, many important issues, and you've got great leadership, and my personal feeling is anybody here is a leader in your own right for the work that you're doing. And yeah, so it's been a really good opportunity for me to be here today. And my call to action is blow some of this stuff up. Find out some of them. For those of you who ever heard of Willowbrook School, the Willowbrook State School for the mentally retarded in Staten Island, which was an institution for a couple of thousand disabled people. The way that Willowbrook got broken up was that a couple of doctors within Willowbrook went to an unknown reporter at that time, Geraldo Rivera, and got him the keys to be able to come into the institution and look what was going on. You may have some reporters that would be willing to go in unannounced to look at some of these schools where this is happening. I'm not telling you what to do or when to do it, but I think, seriously, but I think we need to think about ways that you can be exposing some of these really terrible things. I mean, at the end of the day, these schools said, your kids can't come here. And if these children didn't go to school, the schools would have been just happy. And nobody would have come knocking on their door to say, your child is 8 years old or 10 years old and you're violating a state law that your child is supposed to be in school. Because the parent would then say, well, I tried to get my kid in school, but the school said they wouldn't take them. And so they turn around and say, thank you, we're not going to do anything. So anyway, I guess that's what got my gander up most. And I really thank you. It's been a great couple of days for me to learn more about what's going on and the good work that you're doing. And, on this restraint legislation, make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please feel free to continue to have conversations as long as you want, and have a safe trip home. And again, thank you for everyone who helped us put this together.